Hi, I'm Benjamin Studebaker.
And this is David McKerracher. You're listening to Why Left?
So today on Why Left, we're going to talk about old people, specifically old politicians, and why they don't trust Gen X politicians. A lot of the time it gets framed as boomers versus millennials, Nancy Pelosi versus AOC. But there's this big collection of politicians who are in what until very recently was regarded as the prime of their careers, in their 50s and 60s. And these guys keep getting overlooked. When
Mm-hmm.
they pick somebody over 70 or even over 80 for a job, the people that would traditionally be in line for that job are the people in their 50s. Those people you don't hear very much about.
So why is that? And I just want to kind of lead off with just like I'll just say a couple of things here because I think you probably actually know the names, faces, probably addresses for most of these Gen X politicians who are being overlooked right now. Whereas I just literally don't even know who they are. I know that there's Mitch McConnell and that he's having senior moments where he's seizing up on camera and he can't even say a sentence and he looks like a poor old man. And then we've got Biden falling down the stairs and RBG dying and everyone's like, "Well, wait, why didn't we replace her when we could?" And then now we've got Nancy Pelosi she's on a walker, at the House. And it's because she had a senior moment where she fell and there was blood everywhere. This is gruesome. What's going on? Is there is there something wrong with Gen Xers that makes them incapable of leading? Or is there something wrong with the two-party system and where these institutions are currently at that makes it so that it's very hard to replace people? Right?
So I think it's a little bit of both, right? One of the things that goes on is that it's difficult to get rid of people because their seat's been gerrymandered in the House, right? Or you've got a primary process now that makes it hard for the party to go, hey, how about enough of that? If the primary voters keep voting for somebody, they keep becoming the nominee.
Right.
But in addition to this, there's some stuff where you're talking about a leadership role, and it really is up to the other guys in the caucus, the other Democrats, the other Republicans in the caucus, who they pick for these leadership roles. They can pick anybody they want, and they're still tending to pick quite old people. So it's not just a case of only old people win the election.
Mm.
If you look at the Senate and the House caucuses, while it is true that the median ages are high, you've got a lot of people over 70 and another large contingent over 60. There's still a good chunk of senators, about a quarter of all senators between the ages of 50 and 59, and another, 10% or so under the age of 50 in the Senate. So you've got, more than a third of the senators under the age of 60, and you've still got, you know, pretty much half, just about half of the members of the House under the age of 60. So it's not as if there are no people to pick.
Mm.
What's going on is that a lot of these people who are in these kinds of age ranges have not developed the kinds of political skills necessary to be competitive for some of these leadership jobs.
What
And
are
this is where we
those?
got to
What
get
are,
into a little bit, what are those skills and why don't
yeah.
Gen X politicians have them?
Yeah. So you have a working understanding of what those skills are?
Yeah, so, you know, if you noticed when our new guy, the 74-year-old with cancer, was picked to head the Democratic caucus,
Wait,
when
what?
he's asked about, oh, yeah, you heard about this?
No. What? That just
Yeah,
happened? Wait, what?
yeah, this just happened. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that just adds to everything we're talking about. What just so can you maybe unpack that for a second for
See, I just assumed that you knew about this, and that's why you wanted to talk about this today.
no, it's just there's something in the wind. I just keep seeing stuff about old people, and honestly, part of it's like I wonder if like mainstream media has a talking point they're on about right now. Like if mainstream media itself is interested in pushing this talking point about how old and seemingly irreplaceable all these people are. I don't know, but like I keep seeing it over the last couple of months. So
Yeah. Okay. So the reason you're seeing this is that in December, House Democrats voted to elect Representative Jerry Connolly, the
okay,
as the party's ranking member on the House Oversight Committee, beating out a bid from AOC. Connolly beat AOC by 131 to 84 for this post. And apparently Pelosi specifically pulled for Connolly and helped him get the spot.
okay,
There had been reports that perhaps AOC had the support of the majority of the members on the committee, but nevertheless, Connolly won the steering committee vote. So the steering committee is a smaller group that advises the overall caucus. And
mm,
even within the steering committee, Connolly edged AOC out 34 to 27. So then Donald Trump tweeted about how AOC was being overlooked. And AOC tweeted about how, it's bad when Donald Trump is sympathizing with you.
yeah, yeah,
So all of this happened, almost a month ago now, roughly 3 weeks ago. And this has kicked up more of this conversation about older people, along with the stuff to do with, say, Mitch McConnell and his agedness and the presidential race between Biden and Trump. There's been a lot of talk about agedness. The thing
right.
to bear in mind is in these Democratic presidential primaries, Gen Xers run in them, they just don't win. They don't win.
Is this
If you
because
think
a
about 2020 and Biden versus the field, there are a lot of people younger than Biden in that race, but none of them won.
mm, mm,
And so many people in 2020 said, I wish there was somebody young we could pick. But
yeah,
then nobody voted for the young people who were running. And they voted for Biden while saying, I wish we could pick somebody young.
okay, so yeah, and then Sean Moon said, "How about the congressional representative who is in a nursing home? Do you know about that?"
Yes, there's a congressional representative who's in a nursing home. Yeah, we had Dianne Feinstein, you might remember, in the Senate, trying to vote even though she couldn't remember what was going on.
I no, so yeah, never assume I remember anything because I don't follow any of this. So this is all confirming this vague hunch that I was forming that there is an issue with a sort of bottleneck between the olds and the youngs, and somebody with very white knuckles is holding on to the torch that is supposed to be passed down.
Yeah, so Dianne Feinstein died in September of 2023, but prior to that, literally just a couple months before that, she appeared confused during a vote on a defense appropriations bill. And because she didn't realize that it was a time to just vote aye or nay, she started trying to give a speech at an inappropriate time,
Mm.
prompting an aide to whisper in her ear, just say A. She was 90 years old at the point at which that happened.
Let's watch the clip that made me think of doing this. I think originally because I think up until I saw this clip,
here in
it
Washington.
always seemed to be like a Democrat problem, but this is a Republican thing too. And so I want to show the clip here. Let's see if I can get it showing. Um, let's see here. Pull it up so we're able to see. Share it for you as well. Okay, let's put us over here. Put it right here. All right. Let's go. Here we go.
There are Meanwhile, here in Washington, there are new concerns tonight about the health of the Senate's top Republican, Mitch McConnell. McConnell was in the middle of a press conference when he abruptly stopped speaking. The 81-year-old fell earlier this year and suffered a concussion. CBS's Nicole Killian is on Capitol Hill with the latest.
And a string of
Just a few moments into his weekly news conference, Minority Leader Mitch McConnell stopped talking mid-sentence and froze.
Mitch.
Okay, Mitch. Anything else you want to say, or should we just go back to your office? Do you want to say anything else to the press?
He was escorted away by colleagues before returning a few minutes later to answer reporters' questions.
fine.
You're fine, you're fully able to do your job.
McConnell emerged from his office this evening after receiving a call from President Biden.
Well, the president called to check on me. I told him I got sandbagged.
A McConnell aide said he felt lightheaded and stepped away for a moment, but the incident prompted fresh inquiries about the 81-year-old's health.
Any concerns about his health, or have you noticed anything?
I always wish Leader
Yeah, so when I saw that, I was like, oh, so it's happening to them as well. McConnell's, and hey, to be fair, I think it's a normal human problem to be at a loss for words sometimes. But if anybody had eyes on screen there, it seems pretty clear he doesn't know where he is. And you notice that they said, any other words you'd like to say to the press? Like they're trying to remind him what's going on.
Yeah. And this is a specifically American problem. If you go and look at the front bench for other governing parties in other liberal democracies in other comparable kinds of states, you don't see this kind of agedness. It's a problem that comes out of several distinct things. One is the changes to the primary system that occurred after the 1968 presidential election, where the segregationist George Wallace won multiple states. And in response, both of the parties changed their nominee selection rules so that they would pick nominees through binding primaries as opposed to having the primaries be advisory for conventions. This is part of a sea change in how the parties pick their candidates. From that point forward, there is an ever-increasing incentive to please the primary voters rather than other members of the caucus of the parliamentary party in parliamentary speak, right? So back in the old days, if you wanted to get ahead in your career, the people you had to make happy were the older people in the party who already occupied major offices. You did what they told you to do. You learned what they had to teach you. And in exchange, they advanced you up a ladder. And this had a kind of pacing to it. And there was very much a sense of reputation. It was a question of what do the older people, the more experienced people think of you? And if they thought you were doing good work, they would advance you along. Your primary way to advance was to make them happy. Now, once the primary system came in, you have this alternative audience, which is the primary voters for the party. And the primary voters, this combines then with the gerrymandering to be a quite strange group of people. Because not only are the primary voters not identical to the general electorate or to the registered base for the party nationally, they are often quite specific to the registered base for the party in an unusually designed district, which has therefore an unusual composition in terms of voters. So this produces a lot of cases where you have representatives and who are quite unusual in terms of what they think they need to do to be successful politically. It even occurs at the Senate level, because at the Senate, you're picking Senate candidates through primaries. So even though there's no gerrymandering at the Senate level, the primary system does affect gradually over time the kinds of people who tend to be picked for Senate jobs. Now, initially, when these people are coming in the 70s and 80s, you still have this large cohort of senators and representatives who began their careers in the 50s and 60s before these changes took place. So there's a long period of time after the primary system is changed where you have this kind of mixed caucus. that includes old machine people and new primary people. And so the first generation of new primary people still has considerable incentives to pay attention to the old machine people, because when they come in through the primaries, they're surrounded initially by old machine people. And someone like Joe Biden is about the oldest you can possibly be in American politics and be one of these first generation primary people. He was elected to the Senate for the first time in 1972. The thing is, each generation forward you go, the emphasis gets further and further away from the machine politician norms, because the institutional context which gave rise to those norms recedes ever further into the past. And the politicians who are occupying these older positions, they receive these norms because of when they came into politics. But because they are not part of the same institutional mechanism that existed in the party back in the 50s and 60s, the reasons that for those norms to exist are not obvious apart from when you came in, this was the way things were done. And this makes it harder for them to explain to subsequent generations why they should follow these norms. And so the norms, which initially had a function, it was not just a question of you personally getting ahead. It was also, this is how the caucuses organized voting to occur. Through these complex patronage mechanisms that occurred within the caucus, and where there was no real worry about what the base of the party would think of anything that would happen. All of it was done inside committees, inside smoke-filled rooms, often not open to the public, not open to journalists. So there were all sorts of things you could do in terms of making deals that become harder and harder to do as more and more of the business of the legislature is broadcasted to the public. And more of it is broadcasted to the public as senators and members of Congress look for support from outside of the party as the way to get in, and then potentially as the way to try to build influence. So a lot of these guys are thinking, maybe one day I'll run for president, therefore I need to be strong with the base of the party. But that conflicts with doing the things that are necessary to consolidate a position with insiders inside the apparatus. And it's quite difficult to transmit knowledge of this because so often there's no immediate and obvious incentive to receive the knowledge.
There's no incentive.
You see this especially
to
coming in with Gingrich.
Yeah.
So by the time you get to Gingrich in the 90s, Gingrich is the first Speaker of the House to have been picked on the primary system. Before Gingrich, the leadership was consistently old people who predated the modern primary system, predated 68 in terms of when they came into Congress. So in the 80s, what people always go, oh, remember the 80s when they got along? In the 80s, even though you had people who had been picked by the primary system, younger in the parties, the leadership of the parties was old 50s and 60s people who came in the 50s and 60s, and so were brought up in that system. Gingrich begins trying to campaign in the House floor for elections. He starts trying to use floor speeches in the House. He brings cameras in, puts this stuff on C-SPAN, and starts trying to use speeches to influence electoral politics with the aim of building a large Republican majority in the House by getting on cable television. This is enormously innovative at the point at which Gingrich does it. And if you notice, if you turn on C-SPAN, a lot of the speeches are given in front of no one. Nobody comes. And the purpose of the speech is for the senator or the member of Congress to campaign to you, the public, about something, often to try to raise money, to generate support for the party or for their particular faction within the party. And so a lot of the speaking that now goes on is for the public and not for other people. And in the caucus or in the party. And now that stuff goes on in these committee meetings And oftentimes it goes on, if it goes on at all, in private in spaces that we don't have access to. Because everywhere where the cameras are, you can't have a free-flowing open conversation of the kind that they used to have back when they did these negotiations. If you have
Okay.
journalists in the room, if you have cameras in the room, you can't have the real discussion. And people back then thought this is transparency. You'll be able to see what's going on. No, it just means that now nothing can go on where it previously went on. And now it becomes harder to figure out what actually is meant to take place.
Mm.
And once these new leaders come in, they tend to, they are sometimes prizing people initially who are good on television. But being good on television and being good in the secret meetings are different skill sets. And this is something that Grassley said when he was asked, why should someone like you have this job as opposed to somebody younger? He said, because young people think this is about getting on TV. Young people think this job is about getting on social media and being viral. That's not what this job is about. This job is about marshaling votes. The thing is, institutionally, by introducing the primary system, the parties created a mechanism whereby talking to the primary voters and raising money from the primary voters and generating support with the primary voters is an important part of the job.
Mm.
So they created a contradiction between what the leadership really wants ultimately and someone that they want at the top of the party and what the leadership needs in terms of building enthusiasm with the base.
Mm.
And so now you have this dwindling number of older people who know how to run a party and this larger number of younger people who know how to generate enthusiasm with the primary base. And in this case, what happens is that all of a sudden you reach a point where all of a sudden you're supposed to have different skills from the ones that got you to where you are. And it's very difficult for people who get all the way to the House or all the way to the Senate to reach a point in their careers where they go, wait a minute, all of the skills I thought I was developing are all of a sudden not considered useful, potentially considered a liability because I'm getting too much attention from the public. I'm not a good backroom deal negotiator. I'm putting too much of what I'm doing out there in front of people. So I'm getting over scrutinized all the time. And so I can't have a meeting where people feel like they can talk to me without all of that other stuff present. You're starting to see some of this in some other political systems, but in most other systems where this problem is happening, it's only just beginning. In the UK, until very, very recently, the party leaders were picked almost entirely by the members of parliament who are in the party.
Mm.
And party members did not have say in who the party leaders were going to be. And they certainly didn't have any say in who the MPs would be. They had no primaries for picking who would get to run in particular constituency races as a representative of the party. All of this is beginning to change now in other systems in the name of making the process more democratic, more open, more transparent. But the effect of this is that it creates a conflict between what you need to do to keep the party coherent from the point of view of governing and legislating, and what you need to do to maintain the support of the party members who don't sit in parliament, can't vote in parliament, don't matter in parliament, but do matter potentially for getting into the leadership position. And we saw this with Jeremy Corbyn in the Labour Party. We saw it with Boris Johnson and the Conservative Party. You could have this clash between the leader who has the loyalty of the party members and the parliamentary party, the people that the leader actually has to lead in parliament. And a lot of people have a hard time noticing that actually parliament is different from just public approval or party member approval or registered supporter approval. Actually running the parliamentary party is a totally different job from just generating public enthusiasm.
Mm.
But the Gen Xers, they don't have this set of skills. And that's why they're not getting picked. And the boomers are going, why don't you guys have this set of skills? Well, the boomers came into the party at a point when the rules had just been changed. They picked up a bunch of skills by osmosis because of when they came along. They don't know how to share those skills. And they go, well, how come you guys don't have the skills? Well, they didn't teach the Gen Xers how to do any of these things. And they didn't teach the Gen Xers how to do any of these things because they didn't inherit the old structures that caused the people to be around who educated them in how to do these things. So they have no way of reproducing those kinds of people. They've lost the party structure that they used to have that used to do that work.
It's kind of like a habitus and field issue. It's like the field itself changed in some fundamental way. People who were in the field before had the right habitus, but new people have come on, and it's like because the positions have changed, and habitus is mostly like this unconscious dispositional way of occupying positions. It's like, how do you actually pass that on if it's something that's just, you've just lived it, but it's not like it came from some instruction manual.
Yeah, and it changes so slowly because initially when you first make the change, the overwhelming majority of people in the caucuses will be people who were picked on the old system, who came up in the old system and understand the rules. Because of how long people's careers tend to be, it takes a very long time for the composition to change enough that you start to see the real consequences. I would say you couldn't really see the consequences of the primary system in terms of the caucus behavior until the 90s, when those people actually got into the leadership positions within the caucuses. And then the people that were produced by that 90s leadership are very unskilled. A lot of the people who are not getting picked in the Democratic Party are people who started their careers in the 90s and 2000s and learned from the Clintons. It was the Clintons and that era of the Democratic Party that taught them what to do. And those people taught them very badly. So you've got people like Harris, who started her career in the Clintonite Democratic Party as a tough on crime prosecutor who was going to address the crime spree in the 90s. And somebody like her, what kinds of political skills did she pick up? She mainly picked up skills for going into a meeting in California with primary voters and making them feel seen and listened to and saying whatever was necessary to satisfy those people. But she never became someone who was a real operator in DC. She never became someone who knew how to pull strings or get things done. And when she was picked to be VP and when she was considered as a presidential contender, they thought about it entirely in demographic terms, in terms of which voters will resonate with her. They didn't think in terms of, is this somebody who can govern? And that's why she flamed out as a presidential contender in 2020. As soon as it became, wait a minute, there's going to be enough scrutiny here that she's going to have to convince people she can govern. And she's just saying whatever the room needs to hear in these meetings. And the stuff she's saying conflicts, and she's getting enough press scrutiny now that this is a huge problem. When you're senator in California, the media doesn't follow you quite closely enough for these problems to be exposed. But now it's way too visible. In the 2020 primary, it became very clear she cannot be the person responsible for the decisions.
So I want to just check here. My sort of vague impression about caucuses and with the difference that they make. I want to put forward what I think is going on there. Maybe you already said it and it went over my head, but I just want to also say for people who've never been to a caucus, my experience of caucusing is pretty crazy because when I came in on it, which by the way, in the Democratic, party here in Idaho, Boise especially, I think the system moved from caucus to primary in the last
I should clarify.
5 years.
Just now, when I've been using the word caucus, I have not been using it to refer to when the voters get together in a caucus to pick a candidate. I've been using it to refer to the parliamentary party, but using a more American term for that. So the caucus, the group of Democrats in the Senate, the Democratic Party caucus in the Senate, that language.
Oh, okay. So can we just then, because that I was wondering, what you were getting at. So, because I thought you were saying people went from voting in the voting booth to voting in caucuses, and that made a big difference. So that's not what you're saying.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that it used to be that you would get picked if you wanted to run for Senate in, say, California, and you're Richard Nixon, and it's the 40s and the war's over. You have to impress a bunch of people, in the Republican Party in California if you want that job, who are deep, deep entrenched party people who make decisions in private with each other through handshakes, who don't answer to primary voters, don't answer to base voters, don't answer to voters, really at all. The voters' opportunity, the old way it used to work is that the voters' opportunity to influence the outcome is at the general election, where the Republican Party insiders pick their person they want on the ballot, the Democratic Party insiders pick the person they want on the ballot, and you vote in the general election. And that's all you do. Then they started to do this thing where they would have non-binding primaries where you could help advise the elites in the party by expressing what you'd like to see happen. The trouble is that people became increasingly frustrated with how little the elites cared at all about what they expressed in the primary. And this came to a head in 68, right? In 68, the primary voters wanted Ronald Reagan to be the candidate for the Republican Party. And in the Democratic Party, the primary voters wanted an anti-war, very, very college kid-friendly candidate, like a McGovern or an RFK Jr. before he was assassinated. And the parties ignored those people completely, and they picked Hubert Humphrey, the vice president for Lyndon Johnson, who was pro-Vietnam War for the Democratic Party. And they picked Richard Nixon to be a Republican, the Republican nominee. And Hillary Clinton attended the 1968 Republican convention, and she was for Nelson Rockefeller. And she cried and wept because Richard Nixon defeated Nelson Rockefeller, right? So what happened in 68 is that a lot of these people got angry and upset at the way that they were treated by the parties. In the case of the 68 Democratic Convention, there was rioting. And then George Wallace, who used to be a Democrat, ran a third-party campaign to try to defend segregation. And he won multiple states and almost put the party in a situation where there could have been nobody winning 270, and then the election would have been thrown to the House, and then Wallace would have organized the Southerners to demand concessions on segregation in exchange for their votes. That was his plan. So to try to put a stop to this kind of game, which in 68 came to appear very dangerous to the parties, they made the primary system binding, and they began applying it all over the place to all sorts of different offices. Now, sometimes they picked with caucuses and other times with primaries, depending on the state. But in either case, now the voter has an opportunity to influence who goes on the ballot. So it's not just a question of, do the party elites think that you know how to govern? Do they think that you know how to be a good boy or good girl in a meeting? Do they see that you are listening and paying attention in the smoke-filled rooms?
Right.
Now it's also, can you get votes from these people? And this dual mandate to get votes from these people and to be a good little boy, good little girl in the room, these things pull against each other more and more over time as gradually you have these transformations in the media, you get cable TV, you get social media, and you get gradual change in the caucus composition as fewer and fewer of the people who are in the caucus have a direct link to the previous system and the being a good little boy, good little girl. So you get to a stage where you have a very, very small number of people, and now there are none. There are no people left who got elected during the good little boy, good little girl era. Nobody who started their career in that era. Joe Biden was, one of the first to come in the modern primary system. The people who are older than Joe Biden, they're just gone. They're dead and they're gone, right? But in the 70s and 80s, you still had those people running the caucuses. People who had originally been picked in smoke-filled rooms with no voter input, still running the Democratic Party caucus, the Republican Party caucus. So in the leadership positions, Speaker of the House, Senate Majority Leader, the whips, those were the guys. By the 90s, these people who were picked in primaries start to take over the parties. They actually take the leadership roles. And these people think that their innovation is that they're going to emphasize media more than the previous generation did. And they go on TV all the time and they bring the cameras into the meetings where they're not supposed to be.
And these are the
Right?
C-SPAN performances.
Yeah, the C-SPAN
Okay.
cameras. Now, these people are mad at the millennials and Xers for being more social media oriented and for taking this even further
Right.
than they themselves took it. In the 90s, they introduced all of the media bullshit. And now they're mad that the younger people are taking it even further than they took it. Well, why are they mad? Well, the younger people are taking it so far that it now conflicts with actually getting business done. They saw this as a nice supplementary strategy tactic that you could use to increase base voter support, maybe improve turnout, right? When Gingrich does it in the 90s, it helps him get a big, big win in 94 in the midterms during Bill Clinton's first term. He gets this great big win. He wins all these seats because, wow, he's letting people see what goes on. He's letting people see the business. And the people who got into politics back in the 90s, a lot of them became C-SPAN junkies. They thought they were actually getting to see what went on. Right?
This is how the sausage gets made. I know.
And
now.
look, there's a real difference between the Republicans and the Democrats, they thought, because Gingrich is letting you see what happens. And the Democrats, they want to keep it all hidden from you. But Gingrich wants to show you. So there was this, contract with America. We're going to have a new way of doing things that's going to involve you.
Okay.
Right? Your values, your principles are going to be more in our minds, and you're going to see that because we're going to invoke that stuff on TV. So this gradually completely changed the composition. And now you're at a point where the people who still know how to operate a caucus are actually becoming senile and dying. And I think there's an interesting question here as to whether the next generation can operate a caucus well enough to pass a budget, can operate a caucus well enough to raise a debt ceiling. Maybe the debt ceiling needs to be abolished because we no longer have people who are competent enough to play the debt ceiling game in a trustworthy way. And maybe the people who are, in the financial sector, maybe they don't want those people making that decision. So maybe the debt ceiling will be abolished as a way of relieving pressure on the leadership of the Republican and Democratic parties. But why would that be necessary? Used to be that everybody understood the debt ceiling game was just a game that you play. But maybe now, maybe they're not sure if the people in the leadership roles or just under the leadership roles still understand that. And if you're not sure that they understand it, then what you do is you try to keep the people who still understand in charge for as long as possible.
Because I also imagine that there's some kind of trust network, or that obviously there would be multiple, but like there's some when we're talking about the olds, that there's enough like proof that you'll say one thing and then do another thing, and they're like, yeah, we know what you'll do. And so they're able to work with you on the basis of what you've done. But of course, this is something that they've kept a close eye on. There's been probably 50 years of conversations they've had on golf courses and out in sweat lodges and all the kinds of weird stuff they go do when they're re-upping their adrenochrome or whatever it is that they go off and do. And then they've got like this fresh blood, these fresh people looking to impress on social media. And it's like, well, yeah, how do you hand off the torch? There's the one side where it's just like having a feel for the game and these people not talking the same language. But then there's the trust bonds, which can include, you owe me one, or I owe you one. And like those kinds of debts keep people like in working together in such a way where like we won't make each other look foolish in X, Y, or Z ways in public. Like those kinds of things are just implicit. Oh, we'll argue with each other, but not about these certain things. And like there's like this working knowledge, whereas like with a fresh batch of like AOC types, where it's like, well, is she just gonna is she going to create more problems for us because she's going to go to her social media stream and say something that makes our lives difficult, you know?
Right. Now, there's that problem with, say, the AOC millennial type, but there's also a different problem with the Kamala Harris very late boomer or early Xer.
Okay.
These are the people that you'd really expect would start to take on bigger roles at this point. And part of the trouble is that the ones that are trustworthy for the establishment are not vote winners. They don't get enough primary votes. They don't generate enough enthusiasm. So when you pick one of these younger people in their 50s to be the top of the ticket, they don't get enough votes and they don't win. And if you pick one of these young people, you don't trust them, and often with good reason. So your best bet politically, if you feel like you need to win the election, will be to throw out another one of these very old people who still has a style which is serviceable enough in both directions. The thing is, the boomer style is the default 20th century nostalgia style. The boomer style is something that we all can deal with because it's something that comes from the 80s or earlier. It comes from this memory of a monoculture. So a politician who speaks 80s boomer has some ability to talk to very broad swathes of the American public. But if you don't speak 80s boomer and you have something that's been optimized for primaries, and then you haven't optimized that well because you've been trying to climb the ladder, so you have made various kinds of concessions, you usually end up in a position where either you have optimized too much for the party establishment and you're no longer cool enough to win the votes, or you've under-optimized for the party establishment, you're not trustworthy enough, and therefore you won't get picked.
Mm. So with
And
this,
so they just keep defaulting to boomers.
how does this relate to in your chronic crisis, The Way is Shut? I remember you talking about blue districts, like they go 80% blue, it's like guaranteed. So politicians aren't speaking to Americans, they're speaking to those kinds of districts. That's what we're getting at with like how gerrymandered their discourse is, right?
Yeah, that goes on in the House. But this is also a problem in terms of presidential politics and Senate politics. So the gerrymandering is not sufficient to explain it. It is a factor, especially with the House races. And in particular, in my book, I'm talking about this in relation to the kind of DSA Justice Democrat types who win almost exclusively in heavily gerrymandered House seats that are very, very, pro-Democrat, very pro-Hillary Clinton. So they don't win in the more mixed kinds of places where Bernie Sanders was more successful in, say, 2016 in the party primaries. So they optimize a little differently. Bernie Sanders was optimizing for primaries in places that are not traditional Democratic strongholds, that the party doesn't usually expect to win. Whereas someone like AOC has optimized for the kind of Democratic House seat where Democrats are always already popular and have an easy time winning. Her assumption was that she could only win that seat by competing for hardcore Democratic primary voters, and that Republican voters were not going to be important because there weren't very many of those in the seat. Independent voters were not going to be very important because there weren't even very many of those in the seat. So in her case, she has a style that's optimized for a very specific kind of place, which means that the national appeal of somebody like her is going to be much more limited. But you do see this problem even among senators, because it's not just the gerrymandering, it's also the need to win a primary, a statewide primary. Even a statewide primary causes you to do things that are suboptimal from the point of view of keeping the party together, running the party, getting things done in the party. But yes, you do see that this problem is more severe and more advanced in the House because of the gerrymandering. That's why the House is more all over the place with regard to all of this stuff than the Senate. And all the appropriations bills, all the spending bills, they all begin in the House. So all of this you really see when it comes time to argue about money.
Everybody will be right back right after this.
Ha ha ha. Yeah, that was funny. And/or that was a good point, Dave. I probably fully agree with you. Man, this is great. Aren't we having a great day? This is going really well. But hold on, man. Something just came up. I got something I got to go do. I'll be right back, man. Don't go anywhere. Just give me a minute. Hello, audience. I'm here to talk to you. How are you? I hope you're well. I'm glad you're here. I wanted to first and foremost recognize you and let you know that you do a great job in general as an audience. I'm convinced that the Theory Underground audience is the best audience on the internet. And thank you for that. You know, over the last several months, we've really worked together to build a finely tuned audience machine. You guys do a good job. You're deliberate. You're intentional. You stay on track. You follow the thread. You ask good questions, clarifying questions. You keep the bullshit to a minimum. It's good. You guys are great in the live chat and in the comment sections. Thank you. I wanted to let you know there's another way that you could be helpful as an audience member, and that's by remembering to hit the like, share, subscribe buttons. It's by leaving a cool comment. That's by maybe giving a review on the podcast app or whatever, and doing all the algorithm things. Because there was a point in time when you, audience member, were not a member of the audience here because you didn't know about Theory Underground. You were just out there doing your thing, living your best life probably. And then you were like, oh, what's going on over here? This looks interesting. And now you're here. And now you do a good job. But think about the next guy. There's a guy out there or someone out there right now who really kind of in a sense really belongs in the audience at Theory Underground because they're going to get an awful lot out of it, but they're also going to bring an awful lot to the ongoing conversations. And the only way they're going to know is if you, dear audience, continues to do the algorithm things. So the algorithm keeps recommending Theory Underground to new people. So do us a favor, do yourself a favor, and do the next guy a favor. Pay it forward, and that'll be awesome. That's all. That's all. You know, just wanted to pop in, say thanks. You're doing a great job. We appreciate it. Give yourselves a pat on the back. And with that, we'll return to our regularly scheduled broadcast. Peace out, guys. Actually, there's a good chance I'm on the video. So when this commercial break is over, I'll be there either way. Peace.
And we're back. All right, Benjamin, I'm going to ask you a question. What about Obama? Obama's younger. He seemed capable of speaking to America, and at the same time, he must have been good enough at working with the insiders. So what makes him so special, and why does it seem like they can't come up with someone like that again?
Yeah, Obama's a late boomer, born in 61.
Oh,
yeah. So technically speaking, Obama is still a boomer.
I think he's like eternally 35 in my heart. I don't know why. Like he just seems like a young guy.
Gen Xers treat him like he belongs to them because that's the closest they've come so far.
Okay.
But yes, Obama is an interesting case because they picked the younger person over the older person. The younger person wins the election. Now, if you listen to what the party insiders really think about Obama, the people who are not brought in by Obama and don't owe their careers to Obama, their impression is that Obama didn't have enough experience and didn't know enough about what was going on, and therefore underutilized opportunities that Hillary Clinton would have better utilized. That's what they think.
Okay. So at this point, they're like, we learned our lesson. But also you're saying he's older. So, I mean, that's the other thing. He is older.
Yeah, he's not as young as you might think, specifically for a discussion like this about generational cohorts in parties. If you compare him to Harris is 3 years younger than Obama. So,
Oh,
it's closer, right? But also a lot of the concerns about Harris were of a similar kind, except if you looked at Harris, there were problems in both directions relative to Obama. Harris was both someone who had less respect within the party, less bona fides within the party, and Harris was someone who was less popular with the party base and had a harder time managing that base than Obama did. The other thing to bear in mind about Obama is that Obama came from Illinois politics. And Obama came up in Illinois politics during the Madigan era. And Madigan ran an old-fashioned ship in Illinois. Very, very old-fashioned. That only it just has begun to be unwound. Madigan had a chokehold on Illinois politics for an extremely, extremely vast period of time, to the point where he was much stronger than the governors in that state and frequently ruined their careers and occasionally handled things in such a way that they ended up going to prison. And more than occasionally, multiple times this happened. Multiple times the governors went to prison and Madigan continued to run the state from the legislature. You might recall, well, probably you don't, Bruce Rauner, the Republican governor of Illinois, who promised he would reform the state and then got into a wrestling match with Madigan over the budget. And then Madigan managed to not just sink all of Rauner's reforms and budgets, but to cause the people of Illinois to blame Rauner for the fact that all of this was going on, to completely stymie him and destroy ultimately his political career. So Obama had some exposure that was a little bit unusual to a very, very old kind of machine politics Democratic Party system operating at the state level in Illinois.
okay. Yeah, this is like the political science explanation for something that is going on that I guess from my approach, I've only theorized at the level of the medium, at the level of I guess when I'm thinking of gerrymandering Befindlichkeit and the post-class fractured mass, like the way that this would all tie in is just to be like, people aren't capable of speaking to a general public anymore because the conditions of possibility for a general public have been foreclosed, and we only have a certain type of person, Democrat or Republican, old or young, who thinks that when their politicians are saying we and America, that's real. But most people aren't convinced that the we or America is real, that that's actually the audience of such speech utterances, and that there's, on the one side, people who are delusional enough to take those we, us, America statements for granted at face value. And on the other side, there is a skill set that is lacking. And we're talking about it at the level of knowing who to shake hands with and how to cut deals and do all of this sort of backroom stuff. But on the other side, it's like realizing saying things that are going to be popular only within certain, majority blue districts that are not in any way going away or at risk, but can't actually work for a mixed audience.
The creation of this necessary, unnecessary constituency, a constituency that can't actually help you when push comes to shove in the legislature to move anything, but which you nonetheless have to satisfy to get into that legislature.
Yeah.
And which also is not identical to the broader public.
Right. Because
that
not a kind of person
issue.
It's not a kind of person most people relate to very strongly. In fact, or if they do relate strongly, usually in like a negation, like I don't want to be that person, don't want to be around that person,
Yeah. Now, that's not to say that there aren't general problems going on in all liberal democracies that come out of changes to the medium, the structure of capitalism, and so on, that create problems in terms of trying to have a a unified class or a unified society. This is something which does occur all over the place. But in the States, the way in which we handled the crisis of the 60s institutionally introduces this exacerbant, which raises our level of consciousness of the problem and causes us to pay more attention to it. In European states, there is less emphasis on this breakup than there is in the States of this polarization, because you still have institutional mechanisms in a lot of these European states that outfit the politicians with various skills for papering over it. That doesn't mean that it is entirely papered over. In all of these states, we are seeing many of the same kinds of problems, but not to the same level of extreme. And this means that in the American case, there's this opportunity to really flagrantly see certain things that have been exacerbated and exaggerated to the point of being impossible to ignore, in terms of just legislators not having basic skills, caucuses that just don't function, stuff that just doesn't get done. Another thing that causes this is just the sheer fact that the American system allows for the president and the Congress to be of opposite parties, or for the Senate and the House to be of opposite parties. In other political systems, that kind of lockup of the institution to the point at which it can't do something requires a new election. So what you see in the states that are having these problems around the world is an increased frequency of elections with governments that are weaker, that struggle to win large majorities, that require coalitions and also increasingly complicated coalitions. So in these other states, it gets talked about as a problem of coalition forming or a problem of sustaining a government across time. In our system, it becomes polarization. In our system, it becomes, why are people so extreme? That's the same problem, but talked about in a way which tends to make us think in terms of, where are these people coming from? Not in terms of the parties and how the parties relate to each other in, say, a European coalition arrangement, or in terms of a Westminster-style system. But you can see the symptom in other systems. And there's a reason that the Labour leader and the Conservative leader and the Reform Party leader in the UK are all at negative 30 to 40 approval net rating, right? There are reasons for that. And it's difficult in the UK to form a stable government, except for the fact that the first past the post system makes it easier to get a majority on 35% of the vote. And that helps them out a lot, because they're able to govern the country, even though most people hate the government most of the time. Here that produces lockup, and you don't move legislation.
Well, and this is a system that was built to produce this lockup, right? This is one of the very fun, interesting things about the United States.
Which is why it requires a higher level of competence and organization on the part of the parties and on the part of party leaders, because institutionally it helps them less. It helps them govern less. And this means that when they have problems and they have skill issues, it becomes much more visible, much faster in our system.
Which is great entertainment for people who love this kind of entertainment. But for everybody else, it's just really annoying, because it's just a demonstration of how nothing's happening. But there's a lot of drama about the fact that nothing's happening. Anne commented and said, this was a while ago, but I wanted to read it. She said, "It's all just kind of sad. They remind me of my grandpa in his last few years. He told great stories until his last days, but he would be no way fit to be making any major decisions." Yeah, we've had a lot of really great stuff here in the chat, actually. So I'm going to read off a few comments. So Sean Moon said Thomas Frank wrote a book called The Wrecking Crew. It is about corporate capture of government, making government dysfunctional by design. This breeds hopelessness and helplessness among the public. I didn't know about that book. Thanks, Sean. Yeah. What are your thoughts on Thomas Frank there, Benjamin?
Thomas Frank is definitely worth reading in terms of the history of how the Democratic Party in particular has changed, the history of how the legislature has changed. There
How
has,
it
of course,
became.
also been an enormous amount of corporate mobilization with regard to all sorts of issues. But corporate mobilization doesn't necessarily produce dysfunction. It may produce functionality for corporations. The thing that we're starting to really notice lately is that it's just difficult even to get much done in the way of legislation. The actual quantity and volume of legislation that is able to move is extremely limited, to the point at which this causes distress even for oligarchs and corporate leaders. A big part of what's going on right now is that these rich people are getting involved in government themselves because they think that it is dysfunctional. So at this point, we've moved into a stage where it's not simply that the government works for the rich and not for the poor, but that even the rich are finding that the government is not working for them as quickly or as seamlessly as they would like it to. And they're trying to develop their own theories about why that is. And a lot of this is coming back to critiques of the administrative state or the regulatory state or the bureaucrats. And that's where you're seeing things like Doge, which
Mm,
are attempts to make the government work more efficiently for rich people.
mm-hmm.
So I do think it's a little bit more complicated in that it's not simply a change in terms of which classes or income brackets the government serves. It is also that there is a creeping inefficacy of the institutions, even on the terms of elites.
I guess it's like one of the things that's so interesting about it is that every Democrat I've known, especially older ones, they always say it's going to be the young who save us. And they've got absolutely no young people capable of speaking to Americans in a way that's actually meaningful, much less actually doing anything. It's because, like, for me, it's like there's obviously like the level where it's like, well, what are they doing? But there's also like, are they capable at least of pretending they represent people? And right now, the answer is no. No, no, they're not. Nobody is. It's ridiculous. And these are the same people who were like, marching Greta Thunberg out in front of everybody and being like, ah, yes, and then crying and clapping for her. But there's no one. Like, I think of Cory Booker and Pete Buttigieg, and it's just like how unlikable they are to anybody who's anything other than a Disney adult. Right? And it's just they're fake. They're fake tourist people.
Yeah, part of this is that the boomers think that they raised themselves. The boomers think that they fixed problems with the system by being a brilliant, creative young generation that recognized what was wrong with the previous generation and fixed it. They don't recognize the degree to which their success was predicated on their parents and on the way in which the greatest generation set up the system and on their inculcation within the system. Their critiques of the system came out of being shaped and molded by it. Their ability to do anything with those critiques themselves, that ability itself came out of that system that they were critiquing. So they ripped it apart and then they expect the next generation to raise itself because they fancy themselves to have raised themselves. They don't recognize the role that their own parents played in raising them. So they act as if the next generation should be able to, of its own accord, develop a critique and then implement that critique effectively. And if you were to ask them about it, they would say, well, the next generation has a critique, but not an alternative governing vision, not something you can actually do, not something tractable. They need to grow up. They need to get serious. Well, there are no institutions to help them do that. There's no Bildungsmech.
Yeah. No Bildungsmech. Is that everybody? Is that is that everything we want to say about the olds? I mean, we got more out of it than I thought we would, but because I didn't really realize we were going to go into the development of like I like to know about this, about the new primary people versus the old machine people. But we have a little bit of time left for the week if we want to, I don't know, take a look at it for a little bit here.
Yeah, I've got some fun stuff. Fun in the week for Dave. This is the last week from 2024, so it has the faces of 2024. You can see it's got Donald Trump in a Roman-style toga surrounded by his friends with,
Is that
in the
Alex
back,
Jones? Did they put Alex Jones on the front there, or is that Joe Rogan?
They did not. No, it's Rogan. It's Rogan handing him the microphone.
They made him look fat. Okay.
Yeah. You've got Vance, you've got RFK, you've got Joe Biden trying to comfort Kamala. Yeah. Caitlin Clark made it on there. Elon Musk is there. You know, you got a gang here. The one that I wanted to read you that I thought would be instructive and maybe aggravating, but maybe in a way that would be instructive, is one of the pieces that the week has decided is one of the best columns of the week that came out in the United States. Here's their summary of a piece by Noah Smith from noopinion.blog. The reason healthcare is so costly. It says, most people seem to regard health insurance companies as the main villains in the system, but it's doctors, nurses, technicians, and hospitals that are charging you an arm and a leg for your health care. The recent assassination of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson has focused national attention on the healthcare insurance industry, but much of the criticism is based on a fundamental misunderstanding. The health insurers charge modest fees and maintain relatively low profit margins of 2% to 6%, less than half the average of companies in the S&P 500. The real problem is that per capita, our healthcare spending is nearly double that of comparable countries. Our doctors make more than double the salaries of most European physicians. Executives at even nonprofit hospitals are paid millions each year. The tests, procedures, and prescriptions you get cost far more than they do in other countries. The smiling doctor who treats you without ever asking you for money knows full well that you're going to end up having to wrangle with the insurance company for the cost of all those services. Insurance companies are simply hired to play the bad guy.
Huh. So I guess it's just a cost of doing business that they'll get shot every once in a while if that's their job. If their job is just to play the bad guy, I guess, you know, they were doing their job. What can we say? No, that's not what you're looking for. That's not what you're trying to say. So what do you make of that?
Yeah. So notice how once it's about who are the bad people, you can just argue about who in the system is bad and who you should be mad at. What's the reason that the healthcare costs so much? None of the insurance companies has monopoly purchasing power, right? The point with single payer is that there's one payer who can therefore set how much things will cost, right? When you have multiple payers, then the payers can be played off each other.
Right.
So the problem is the insurance companies because there are more than one of them. And the problem is that when you have more than one insurance company, then the insurance companies can't negotiate effectively with the providers because they have insufficient leverage. And then the providers can overly influence how much things cost because the patients have to purchase the healthcare or they die. So it's not as if it's the insurance companies that are bad or it's the providers that are bad. It's when you have a market that determines how much healthcare costs with multiple insurers, multiple payers, and multiple providers. The consequence of this is that the providers get together in these big medical conglomerates. The insurance companies are not able to scale as effectively, and the insurance companies are not able ultimately to control costs. If you start arguing over who's the bad guy, then you miss the structural component to this, and you miss the way in which the market system is itself the problem. But if we go around shooting people on the basis of whether we think they are bad, and we're making these normative judgments about which particular people in the system are the bad people, this moves us away from thinking about healthcare as a market that is necessarily dysfunctional because it's a market for something that cannot be effectively distributed through a market in a cost-effective way. You can't have a market when the patient has to pay or they die, because that means that unless you have a single payer, the price can be as high as you might want it to be. And the only mechanism that the insurance company is left with for controlling the price is to deny coverage if the provider asks for too much money. So it then becomes a tit for tat between the insurance company and the provider, with the provider trying to put the compensation up as high as possible, and the insurance company strategically rejecting stuff to try to prevent the providers from doing that. But the providers are, of course, going to do that because it's a market. If they don't do that, then they'll be compensated at too low a rate relative to their competitors and absorbed by the other major conglomerates that are charging more. What you need is to get rid of the market system so that you can set across the whole system compensation rates that are reasonable, that are compatible with a reasonable cost for people to bear. A multitude of insurance companies can't do that. And that's why there's a problem with insurance. It's not that people who run insurance companies are evil. It's that we have set up a system which is based on there being a continuous negotiation between insurance companies and healthcare providers. And that negotiation is always already rigged against the patient, because the patient has to buy the healthcare or they're dead. Everybody knows that the patient can be made to pay quite a bit.
Right. Everybody knows. Or the patient can just be denied coverage, or it'll be delayed long enough to make it so they die before they get their life-saving treatment.
Yeah. An insurance company for healthcare is not something that should exist, because necessarily, if you are a patient and you need some kind of healthcare, you are going to pay almost anything for that. And so it's quite difficult for insurance companies to make money unless there is an enormous amount of state aid to enable them to make money. And this state aid comes in the form of things like the individual mandate. It comes in the form of subsidies. What Obamacare did is it propped up insurance companies that would otherwise struggle to stay viable as businesses by forcing individuals to buy healthcare and by subsidizing the cost of that healthcare, essentially funneling federal money to those insurance companies. And that was done in exchange for the insurance companies covering people with pre-existing conditions who were previously considered uninsurable. Why are those people uninsurable? Because they cost way too much to insure. Why do they cost so much to insure? They have actual, hard evidence that they're going to be very, very expensive. That's why they have pre-existing conditions, right? So then when you've got an insurance company, that has to cover all of those people, how are they supposed to take in enough money to do that? Of course, the providers are going to charge an arm and a leg in this situation. Why wouldn't they? If they don't, they're leaving money on the table. It's been structured as a negotiation. The state, in ensuring there are multiple insurance companies, has set the providers up to win the negotiation by limiting the leverage of the insurers, of the payers.
I want to read Stephen Wallace's question, but first I just want to say this is obviously a topic that I feel very strongly about. I mean, we all do. Benjamin does as well. If people want to see me talk passionately about it, that happened in a previous episode. I'm not going to do it here. Here, I'll just say I am still unconvinced about our analyses of Mangione. That, and in the sense that, as much as it makes me uncomfortable to say it, this part of me that doesn't want to encourage any kind of violence, of course, there is still like this. I mean, I'll say what Bert said yesterday at dinner. He said that Luigi Mangione did the single greatest, how did he say it? It was the single greatest anarchist propaganda of the deed that has ever taken place in American history. And I was just like thinking about it, because it's like, well, if you're not an anarchist, or if you don't care about propaganda of the deed, or if you think that it's potentially more harmful than beneficial, or that, and there's all kinds of reasons to think about the slippery slope that it leads to, where we're going to have Antifa shooting people that they consider to be bad, when in reality, I don't trust their gauge of what's good or bad. And so that's a little concerning. But with that said, though, historically, that's interesting. I wonder if it's like, is there a different thing that has had this kind of effect in our lifetimes or in American history, right? Like, that's an interesting question. But Bert,
anarchists have killed American presidents before, so I don't think that it beats anarchists killing American presidents, which they've done.
Who was the president who got killed by an anarchist?
That's crazy. I think it was McKinley.
What the hell? They don't teach you about these things because they don't want to encourage.
Leon Czolgosz, an American laborer and anarchist who assassinated William McKinley in 1901.
Okay, McKinley. So with that, I'll read Stephen Wallace's question, and then we'll close this episode out. So he goes, Ben, my question would be related to my experience trying to organize for a statewide single-payer system in the era of every Dem in the world fighting for Obamacare. It was a statewide campaign in Maryland. And obviously, those state-scale campaigns are destined to fail. What could we have done differently?
I think that Medicare for All cannot work at the state level, because if you were to actually succeed in implementing it, you would reduce costs, which would mean that there would be an incentive for providers to not live in your state. And because there's free and open movement among U.S. states, that would be the likely result. Now, you could continue to pay the same level of compensation that other neighboring states pay, but if you do that, the tax burden of the program is going to be too great for an American U.S. state budget to sustain, without a tax rise, which would make that state extraordinarily uncompetitive. So I don't think it can be done at the state level, and I think that that's one of the major mistakes that was made, was trying to do it at the state level. And I understand the logic. If you prove that it works at the state level, people may be more willing to try it at the federal level. But unfortunately, this is not that kind of issue. It can't be done that way. It has to be done at the federal level or not at all.
Okay. Or the global level. I mean, really, if we're gonna remake the wheel, we might as well talk about a bigger wheel. You know, the whole thing's messed up. So, folks, if you want to be thinking about such questions with us moving forward into 2025, this is the beginning of the new year. The best time to get involved is now. We are braiding 4 essential lines of thought throughout 2025 here at Theory Underground. The Introduction to Political Theory 101 course with 12 thinkers, one each month, that Benjamin Studebaker is teaching, kicks off this month with Plato's The Republic. Check out the translation by Reeve, read it, and come prepared. If you are wondering how to get involved, it's the exact same way that you get involved with the other courses and seminars going on this year. The essential courses for 2025 are spread out to give a busy person an opportunity to basically get on the wavelength by only attending 1 to 2 things per week. So, introduction to the philosophy of nature with Nina Power in 12 lectures, or the core concepts and fundamental problems at Theory Underground in terms of the school of thought that is emerging here, what it is that we're doing, the concepts that are unique here, the problems that are unique here, the thinkers that we've been drawing upon. The last 2 years of courses and seminars kind of consolidated into essentials. That's what I'm doing. First of the lectures in that series kicked off yesterday. If you want access to that, if you want access to Nina, if you want access to Studebaker, you want access to Mikey's Intro to Zizek or Land courses, you get all of that for the low cost of $50 a month to become a member. That's just the basic level. We call it the silver membership, but the gold and platinum levels bring additional perks, such as Benjamin's supervisions over your writing and my supervisions over your speeches. If you want to start developing your public speaking skills, you'll be able to do presentations. The people who were at TUCon who did presentations on things that they had written are currently in the process of getting supervisions if their works are being accepted into, well, right now we're working on putting together some publications here. So stay tuned for a lot more on that. Benjamin, do you have any final thoughts or words of encouragement for people who are going to be getting involved with the courses this month?
It's so easy to get involved. You just go to theoryunderground.com and you click register. And then you can use your Google account if you have one to get in, or you can make your own account. Either way. And then you just upgrade your membership to the level at which you'd like it to be at. It's really very simple to do. And the thing is, my course, it's not a standalone course. My course is part of the TU membership. So if you want to take my course, the best way to do that is to subscribe to TU at theoryunderground.com. If you are subscribed to TU, you will have access to my lectures if you're subscribed at the silver level. If you subscribe at gold, you get to be part of the discussion sections. And if you subscribe at platinum, then I will do Oxbridge style full-scale supervisions where I forensically read an essay that you write once a month on each of the topics, as many as you want to do. If you only want to do some of them and not all of them, that's totally up to you. But I will give you the treatment, and I will give you that kind of education that's extraordinarily difficult to get and ordinarily costs people incredible amounts of money.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the thing I'll add to that is, I said this in the chat earlier, but hashtag free Mikey kind of as being one of the sort of telos or guiding principles here at Theory Underground means that Benjamin, Mikey, and I get to do this full time. Like the goal, if we can just get 80 people at the platinum level, we're good, right? We're good. He can quit his job and have health insurance. And I can have health insurance for more than a month for the first time in my life. Something I'm kind of excited about. Like Bert was telling me all about how Democrats made his life easier by extending his Medicaid and making it cover more stuff in the last couple of years, and that he had Biden to thank for that. And I was like, oh, so he bought your loyalty, huh? Well, he didn't try to buy my loyalty. I don't have dental, right? And that's just one of the problems with means-tested programs like this. But if theory,
even I have a crappy little care source card.
Yeah,
that's all I got.
If we're to show the world that theory can really be done by workers and it can be done full time and better than at the university, then it's going to mean that it's like a big kid kind of job, not like this, oh, I'm doing it through Patreon or what. No, we need to have actual coverage, actual health care, right? So that's what you're helping at the platinum level. But of course, in return, we give you more time, more energy, more attention, and expertise.
Yeah, we're creating the conditions of possibility for theory. And it just starts with us. It's free all Mikeys. If you study with us and you commit yourself to theory and you want to be a theorist, we are trying to create conditions under which that can actually happen for people. Nobody's working on this problem. Nobody else is working on it. only Theory Underground works on.
And we'll be right back for the next episode of Why Us right after this. It looks like it's not playing. So people are probably just seeing, it looks like Mikey's face.
So you can listen to special
Now I'm gonna
content.
Stop it, and I'll start it. Here we go. You can support the free and public work at TU by becoming a patron over at Patreon.
But if you would like to get involved and become a member at Theory Underground so that you can listen to special content that is not accessible to anyone else, or if you go up a subscriber level, actually join in the discussions, or at the top level, have us actually read your work, giving constructive feedback, and ultimately paving a way to potentially being a part of what we call the turn, then you'll want to become a subscriber. That's how you will access the ongoing courses and seminars. We've brought together Benjamin Studebaker's experience in political theory and science and philosophy with my critical social theory, phenomenology, existentialism, critique of political economy, critical media theory approach, combined with Michael Downes's fault line theory, you know, the CCRU versus Ljubljana School, or Žižek versus Land. And of course, how he brings those against one another and then transcends them through other thinkers like Baudrillard, who he'll be teaching an intro course to in 2025. All of us are teaching stuff in 2025 that rhymes or argues or goes together. And so the best way to accelerate your development getting into theory right now is to just become a subscriber at TU. Just go to the website, click get involved, and I'm gonna look, what I'm about to play for you all is a really special moment from our documentary that we're working on, an interview where Benjamin explains why he's supporting Theory Underground and getting involved as a active member here at the core of the teaching team.
Yeah, so the thing that I notice is that a lot of people criticize the university, they criticize the left, they don't build an alternative institution. They will go, the university sucks, but you know what's great? Substack and Patreon and YouTube, and they'll lean into that. But that is a negation, right? You guys don't do that. You guys are interested in sublating the university within the newly emergent media. Or you could frame it the other way, sublating the newly emergent media within the university, right? And so this, of course, will ultimately lead, if you take it where it goes, to a question of institutions and having actual economic, social role possibilities for theorists. This is the critical crisis, which is that there are still some very bright, very well-educated people, but they are not able to replace themselves. And because most of them have university positions, their level of interest in replacing themselves is to some degree compromised.
Yeah.
They don't have to worry that much about themselves. They don't have that much stake in it because they're already set up. However, because you are in the underground, you have some potential of being able to actually create an institution or structure which makes it possible for people to do theory in the future. This is something that, as far as I can tell, only you are doing. The thing about freeing Mikey from wage labor, this idea not only that your channel would free you from the Amazon job, but that this could grow in such a way that it could provide spaces for multiple people, and then those multiple people could interact in the way that they would in a monastery or in a university department. This is the revolutionary idea in terms of raising consciousness and making it possible for us to think in such a way that we could return even to the horizons of the tens and talking about things like Medicare for all in a not stupid, not bullshit way, in a serious way. To get to that point, we need to raise our level of ability to think. We need new intellectuals in our generation that are real intellectuals and not people who are running around scared of what the DSA or their university department thinks of them. You have the potential to actually make a real material intervention into not just knowledge production, but in Bildung, into the making of people. This is something that we can do. There's a window right now where I am not in the university, and so I have a real reason to think very seriously about, can we do something else? Because I'm annoyed, myself with the whole process of trying to be in that. And I would like there to be something else, something better. I have all my critiques of it that come in part from being at Cambridge, in part from studying ancient thinkers. We could do something better than it. Not just something that is an imitation or, steals some things from it and does the best you can with it, but something that actually is better and that produces the kind of theory that in modernity, how do you make a Hegel? How do you make a Marx? We have to reinvent this. It's no longer possible to do that. We've got to, I think, actually institutionalize in a material way, and this is the sense in which I will uphold the kernel of materialism, actually giving a shit about the structure and what kind of structure is necessary to give rise to a form of life in which this kind of really, really good work can be produced.
Look at that, guys. Look what I found.
Hey, guys. What's up?
Look at that. It's Nance.
Whoa. I told you I was here.
The logo changed, too. It said,
whoa.
It said WL. Now it says WU.
Now it says WU, so technically it's a triple U. So it's a U cubed, just like T cubed and N cubed and D cubed.
Wait, why is it a U cubed?
Because it's 3 U's, dude. It's a double U plus a U.
Stupid.
Hi, Thirsty. I'm Dad. Fucking
yeah. The new logo is just gonna be a U with a 3
U cubed.
And the best part, I'm starting to think though that good harnessing of online consumer demographic energies, which, by the way, everybody, I don't think that's all you are, but you are also in part that. Good harnessing of it might actually just mean making ourselves indecipherable to people who haven't consumed 100,000 hours of our content, because the more complicated it is to explain what we're doing to other people, the easier it makes it to be that person in that meme who's at the party while everyone's dancing.
They don't know I fucking yeah. Yeah.
They don't know I listened to you cubed, and if I were to explain it, it would take 10 minutes. That's kind of that's what the niches are all about, right?
This morning I saw that Lex Friedman talked to fucking Zelensky, and I was like, that's interesting. Because look, I think Friedman. Look, I want to talk to Friedman. I really do. I really want to talk to him.
I do too.
but let's just say, look, I'm a humanities bro, right? But I can tell he's putting on. And he's a fucking idiot, but also I like him a lot. But he's also if
you mean Friedman?
Friedman. Yeah. He puts on he's far smarter than he actually is. But also I do think he's interesting, and I do think I like his platform. And his platform used to be way more dope 5 or 6 years ago, back when it was all just AI and technology and futurism shit. And then he started getting more popular, and he started doing more pop culture shit. So I think for me, it's fallen a little bit, but I still like it. I think Lex might be my favorite big podcaster, even though I rarely check his shit out. But I like him a lot.
He's definitely really good at putting on a certain kind of demeanor, bringing a certain kind of. So for people who haven't really watched a lot of Lex, you don't have to, don't worry about it. But he's hosting pretty serious conversations, and he has a very no bullshit, like talking to the camera before the interview is saying, this is how I got this interview. This is why I'm doing this. I try to set up these spaces where we can have the, it's very meta, kind of what he brings to it. But also, yeah, isn't it him who put on the Destiny versus Shapiro on Israel?
Yeah, Destiny and Finkelstein, and yeah.
Like
it was him. Now that you mention it.
Yeah, Lex made possible some pretty interesting conversations. But what are you trying to say about Lex? You're trying to say you think he's putting you think he's
No, I don't think. I know. Like I am a humanities bro, right? But I also do spend a lot of time reading about math and science, right? So there's just things that you can pick up on that it's like, oh, you don't actually know that. You're just kind of doing that, performing it. But that's not my problem. I like the guy still.
Yeah.
But because he brings this very young male energy that's very serious, autistic, if you will, but it's like, I'm serious about this, and that's a great counterpart to Theo Von and Joe Rogan. That's the kind of trifecta of male energies, mainstream male energies, right? And that's why we take these guys seriously, because they do matter. Right. And they're actually cool. And it's not to just say, oh, they're interesting cultural artifacts. Like, no, they're also cool and enjoyable. But
yeah,
Lex talked to Zelensky, and I don't know when, it was recently, and this morning I saw it, and I watched the first 15 minutes of it, and he was doing his little preamble like he always does, but it kind of went on and on and on, and it kind of became that word salad thing. But people like the word salad thing. Like, people really do think oh, well, this guy has to do all this preamble, and I kind of implicitly trust this guy as my favorite genius. So I'm actually getting something, even though I can't repeat, what I just heard, and I don't understand what I just heard. And in fact, what I just heard is kind of nonsense. It's still that word salad is seductive to a certain type of person. So it is true that we could remain unintelligible to the outsider, and that would actually work.
Yeah.
But
I've been thinking about it.
I do know the insiders, those of you who have been around and have been paying attention and have been keeping up, you would be able to see that there's more than just word salad happening.
Right. Well, this is two things. It brings up, three things. Okay. Three things we get to talk about. Okay. So one is this meme format that gets to something I think essential about the internet. And so we'll just call it, they don't know. So they don't know. And then I also want to add the podcasts that matter, which would be, Friedman, Vaughn, Rogan. And I want to argue that they do matter. And
for sure,
somebody in and I know that, and I know we have had plenty of conversations like this, but I think that for people who are tuning into Why Us, on the back of this Why I Left episode that just happened, but also potentially who've been listening to the stuff that I've been doing with Nance now for a long time, there's a whole conversation about how to think about these platforms and these people. And the reason I say off the back of this Why I Left episode I just did with Benjamin, part of the reason is because we have an overrepresentation of leftoids in the chat, which means people who like to often dunk on Joe Rogan. So somebody in the last stream was saying something like, oh yeah, well, Joe Rogan's partially responsible for Trump winning. I want to talk about that. But let's come back to it. And so for a moment, I want to focus on this they don't know principle. What was the other thing? There's a third thing that just came up from what you're saying.
Is it word salad, intelligibility?
Yeah. That ties in with the they don't know. But
it's
but it's kind of like esoteric versus exoteric. I kind of think we need to start that conversation, especially now that we officially have a compiling sort of basis of esoteric content at TU.
I just want to let you know that if you hear these words esoteric and exoteric, and if it piques your interest, and if you get excited, and if you get turned on, we're not Strausserites. We're not fucking Stalinoids. We're not Trotskyites. I don't want to attract those people with those words. So while we have, in fact, used these words.
They think it means a cult, too. They think it means a cult.
Or the
it doesn't
New
mean
Age
that.
crystal power, too. Yeah, like, that's not what we're talking about. But they are words that we have used in conversations about what it is we're doing, because it is true that we have a kind of multifaceted approach to how we're thinking about what it is we're doing and how we're approaching things and this and that. And that's always already been there with Theory Underground, with kind of you have to take base, or you have to get at base camp before you really are part of the conversation that's always going on.
Dude, I think now, did you say we're not Strasser-right? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Straussian, not Strasser. That was a slip. Yeah,
because we are Strasserists. No, I'm just kidding. I'm joking. Yeah. No, this is the Red-Brown Alliance realized. So of course we are Strasserists, but I also want to argue that we are Straussian. No, I'm just joking. I'm joking. But I do want to say that Persecution in the Art of Writing by Leo Strauss is an actual very important work. I think we should have a conversation with Tony on this podcast about that, because Tony gets it. Tony is a big fan, so.
Dude, Benjamin would be good for that conversation too.
Yeah.
Especially because we can use Plato to kind of frame the conversation that we would have about it. Right. About this kind of esoteric and esoteric writing. Like, Plato is the way that you frame that conversation. So having Tony, who is probably based in Strauss-Pild, I almost said Strasser again, dude.
You gotta look out. You're basically calling people Nazis. Like, you gotta.
Yeah, Tony's not. No, not at all. But he's like, he knows what the fuck's up. And having Benjamin, I think that would be a great conversation.
Yeah, I'm gonna add it for the next MSTU as an idea. So I'll just put Tony and Benjamin plus David Nance ? Strauss.
Leo Strauss.
So yeah, for our purposes here, the reason it comes up is because we're trying to say we're not being like Leo Strauss, because we're talking about esotericism. Well, why? The reason we have to separate ourselves in this case, obviously, first of all, he's like considered a neoconservative, and so there's all this stuff that goes into that. But for the Persecution of the Art of Writing piece, his point is that every great philosopher always had to talk out of both sides of his mouth. And so when Plato says, oh, I don't know, I just trust what the people say and go with what the gods say, like, when Plato puts those words in Socrates' mouth, he's trying to show that Socrates had a way of saying, I don't disagree with anybody in power. And then he would turn around and immediately contradict himself, because he's like saying what he has to say to satisfy the people. And then he's like, also, though, if you fucking get it, then you know. And so that trying to talk out of both sides of your mouth thing, that's an important thing to think about when you're reading Machiavelli, when you're reading Plato, when you're reading anybody, so that you're not reading it thinking it transparently speaks for itself. Oh, well, he said this, that means he thinks that. Well, yeah, but he could be saying that and then contradict himself purposefully, because you say what you got to say to make the people happy, but then you also say what you say for the genuinely inquisitive minds. This is not completely unrelated to the way that we're talking about this, though it is different.
So while you were talking, I remembered that we did this to Descartes.
We did.
Descartes, we've been talking a lot about Descartes recently because we're both stoked. and that came up in your seminar yesterday. We're doing Descartes 3.0. We are fucking cyber Cartesians. But we also did this interpretation, this hermeneutic, whatever to Descartes' method, discourse on the method. That is something that we're going to re-engage with here on this podcast sometime in the near future. So it's interesting that these kind of I don't know, kismets are happening, or synchronicities are happening. As we're talking about not being crystal power, I'm over here talking about kismet and synchronicity. Decode that, internet.
See, it's easy. It's easily all these one-dimensional troglodytes out here. They all have like a little piece of the truth, and only us with our method are able to come along and save the little babies from drowning in that bathwater by bringing it all together dialectically, because the people who practice dialectics don't understand that they need phenomenology and socioanalysis in order for it to amount to anything.
No,
and so
but
we're the only people.
They need it. They like do. You don't
Yeah.
understand how deeply that need runs.
Yeah. Okay, now that we did all of that, we don't mean this, and we don't mean that, and we don't mean this, and we don't mean that. What do we mean, Nance? Well, it means that we had a 6-hour conversation on the whiteboard 2 days ago in the evening, and it was not public. And in it, all Nance did was say a bunch of slurs, and I took a dump on the lectern. Nope. No. Actually, what we did was
happened.
yeah. No, we pulled it all together, right? So before the call, I had spent the day, kind of, birthing the crystallized formation of something that's come out of some free writing that I did over the course of the last week. I wrote like 40 pages just to kind of get some of my thoughts in order. And out of that, like I was surprised by like this sort of clarity I received. And I put it all up on the whiteboard, and I was like, does this all make sense? Okay, we were testing a new microphone, and I brought Nance in, and then I was like, hey Nance, I didn't want to put too much pressure on you, but consider this your...
This is your dissertation review.
Yeah.
This is your defense.
Yeah, this is your opportunity to explain to me how all the parts at TU have fit together all this time. That would be my dissertation in a sort of sense, but instead it's like, no, Nance, you have to explain to me how what I did here actually makes sense.
It became this kind of oral pass, and we had a day that was meta. We had a day that was about the machinery, the mechanistic side of it. We were meta theorizing. In the morning, there was the meeting of the minds, the meeting of the tech minds.
And then we later did the on supervisions.
That day, supervision. So it was all a very kind of meta day in the first place anyway. So when we entered into that conversation, that was to test equipment. We were just going to test the mic and shoot the shit. And then it became this oral pass where, like there was this kind of unfolding of, or maybe even concretization of the past 2 years, of the hundreds of hours that we've spent together.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Thinking, writing, talking. And also all the work we've done, all the work you've done alone or whatever, all the work I've done on my own, and like just all the things kind of coming together in a crescendo. And it was a moment, and I felt a little silly about it talking to like Nina and everybody yesterday, because I realized I was getting a bit sappy. I was like, we had a moment, guys, but it's also true. There was a crescendo. There was a culmination. It was a moment, and it allowed us to kind of theorize what is a moment.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because really, like, trying to find a plain speak way of talking about how we have time figured out in a way that is not how most people, especially philosophers, have traditionally thought about time, which in part is informed by Heidegger's deconstruction of this sort of infinite sequence of nows, or, tracking of movement, kind of reductivist, flattening kind of linear time that obviously gets mobilized for the sake of capital accumulation, surplus value, etc. No, there's something special about thinking about time in a way that sort of brackets out the fundamental reality or nature of time, but instead focuses on no, but for us, how does it function? And some people would say, well, that's subjective. Okay. Well, that's just most people's way of diminishing everything that matters, which is human. You just go, oh, that's
just your opinion, bro.
That's just subjective. Yeah. Oh, you mean time? You're saying that we shouldn't just think about time in a way like a physicist thinks about it, that we should think about time in a way like how it works for human beings? Sounds made up to me. Sounds like it doesn't matter to me. Oh, okay, cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Who
that
does
means
that serve?
everything else doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. So we were talking about esotericism and exotericism. And for our purposes, it just means, look, there's insider baseball. It's we're going to use a lot of jargon, and we're just going to use shorthand because we both get it, because we've both been on this wavelength now for a long time. I was trying to pull up a picture of the whiteboard from yesterday because I'll pull it up. I have a shot of it I can pull up here. I'm going to put it up on the screen even, guys. So let's see. Let me change the scene layout so you can all see what I'm talking about.
All my screenshots are partly covered.
What do you mean?
I was taking screenshots while you were in front of the board writing on it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I thought you
And then
meant
I realized
right
after
now.
the fact, oh, these aren't going to do anything for me, dude.
Yeah. All right. So everybody can see this, right? So what we have here is the back end.
Space free, haven't you?
Skip in to right here. Yeah. So what you see here, this is what it looked like. This was on Sunday, yesterday. So outside of this figure here is all the stuff that I organized that kind of comes right out of my immediate necessity, my biggest research interests. And everything inside of this figure is something that I basically brought someone else on to teach because it is necessary in some way. And so the reason all of this stuff ended up on the whiteboard is that during the 6 hours of the previous night, when Nance and I were laying out all this stuff, and then we're recording it. And so we were doing this conversation, at the end of it, Nance starts talking about how, hey, just know that when we're name dropping or using jargon or shorthands, we're presupposing hundreds of hours sharing the same, not just space, but actively holding on to the same threads and making sure that we're following, right? So what has happened in the last 2 years? Well, and this is part of this sort of self-legitimation discourse thing that we're talking about doing on this show. So 13 MSTUs in the last year. On average, an epic marathon stream at Theory Underground, what MSTU stands for, on average, those are 12 hours. Our record was 17 hours. That was the one we did a few days before the American Idiots tour in Europe. The entirety of the Being in Time course, which was in 2 parts, and that's in itself one of those tremendous accomplishments, for people like Nance who are doing it for the first time. The first half of Totality Infinity, also a tremendous accomplishment. The second half will come later. The Professional Managerial Class Consciousness and Ideology course, the Idea of the University course, Critical Media Theory, Critical Doxology and Time Energy, all of these courses, all of these seminars, but also Nance has been present for the For They Know Not What They Do by Slavoj Žižek, which Mikey taught, as well as Intro to Žižek, Lacan, and Land courses that Mikey taught, as well as Intro to Illich, which Brian Weeks taught, Intro to Marx, which Chris Catrone taught, Political Philosophy 101, which Benjamin's kicking off here at the end of the month, Philosophy of Nature, which Nina's kicking off at the end of the month, Seminar 11, and Clinical Structures of Psychoanalysis, and What is Sex? McGowan, Brenner, Last. And so that's a lot, but even then, it doesn't cover it. We still did so much more. I'm trying to find where I'm out of the frame. Currently, I'm almost every shot I try to find, I'm like blocking the part. Here we go. Somewhere right around here, we'll be able to see it. When do I step off camera? Yeah, here we go. So how about you tell everybody what we did, just you and I. This is not MSTUs, this is not courses, this is not seminars. These are between 6 and 12 hours, or in one case, 24 hours each.
24.
Yeah.
Before why us and the self-legitimating Johnsons, we just streamed, and we didn't even stream. Sometimes we just did Zoom calls, and sometimes we didn't even record those Zoom calls. And also sometimes we were in the forest in Poland, and sometimes we were in the forest in Oregon, and sometimes we were on the fucking metro in New York, New Jersey. But so we've done so much shit.
Yeah.
So much shit. But we did Capital Mondays, which was a podcast where we deeply engaged with the first 3 chapters of Capital, but also supplementary text as well. So we engaged with Heinrich, we engaged with Mosley, we engaged with Karatani, and we went back over it and Pistone, and we brought in people with whom we had a disagreement. And it wasn't just a random Joe Schmo. Like we brought in people who were worth bringing in to disagree with, so we could clarify our own positions and we could test our own understanding, and we could do the push me pull you thing. Like, we're going to learn from each other, right? I want to have someone I disagree with come on and tell me what I'm wrong about, so that I will stop being wrong about what I'm wrong about, but I will still be right about what I'm right about. So that was Capital Mondays, where we would spend between 4 and 7 hours going over 15 pages of the book. In many cases, going line by line to check our understanding, to do like a deep dive on a specific phrase. Well, why did he use this phrase? Well, let's go to the German. Well, now that we're here in the German, let's go to Heidegger, and let's go to Schmidt, and let's go to Dilthey because Heidegger's using this word. So what does Heidegger mean by it? So what does Dilthey mean by it? So to help our understanding of certain key phrases. So we did this like intense deep dive into really the first chapter of Capital, but also chapter 2 and chapter 3. And that was Capital Mondays. Then we did this reading of the discourse,
which we plan on bringing back to you all very soon. We want to do our second pass on the discourse.
I'm very excited. I'm very excited to do that.
Yeah, realizing what we're doing as political phenomenology is very clarifying. This whole Descartes 3.0 thing that we started talking about in the last week, it's very clarifying, because this sort of radical bracketing that we do, which includes like some of the stuff that drives people craziest, like, why can't you guys just be leftists? Well, because we're trying to do real dialectics, and we don't think we can do it when we're just presupposing so much. Sorry.
Yeah.
You can't
positing the
presuppose
presuppositions. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was a 6-hour reading of the discourse, one sitting. We read Nietzsche, the Aristocratic Rebel, and did a kind of odium session that was like a 7-8 hour stream. We did Byung-Chul Han's Psychopolitics over the course of a few days. We did Paul Virilio over the course of 3 or 4 sessions.
Those are on tour.
Psychopolitics and the Virilio Reader was across the and Gary Gnosko, McLuhan, and Baudrillard. Yeah, those 3 were across basically the western half of the United States, and most of it was recorded. We read Baudrillard in the Shadow of the Silent Majority in Poland with Łukasz, the homie. And also back in Reno, we finished it off. We read Heidegger in Ruins over the course of 2 days. It equals up to like a 25-hour live stream over 2 days. We've done a lot. Like we've legitimately, so all the shit, all the M-stews, and when it's us in the interstices of the M-stews between guests and the courses and all this, we've also done probably at least 100 hours of just reading, not streaming, not writing, not lecturing, not interviewing. Like,
you mean like reading on our own?
No, the two of us
together
have done at least 100 hours of this type of deep exegetical type reading, where we will go page by page, paragraph by paragraph, in some cases line by line of given texts. So there's a lot. There's a wealth of like rigorous, deliberate, methodological, dialogical kind of shared understanding between the two of us. And so in that talk, I did make reference to the fact that we have a lot of shorthand because we have a lot of shared reference.
Right.
So we can take shortcuts with each other.
We can't do that when it's this public stuff. That's what exotericism is like, your public discourse, right? Like that's, but of course we're complicating that as well with the post-class fractured maths thesis. Like the question is like, okay, it's esoteric versus exoteric really assumes a pretty clean break between private and public. And what it's almost like there's the esoteric of there's just us and the people who are committed to getting through a lot of the stuff that we've gone through, versus us kind of presupposing an audience on the internet, a kind of audience that has a lot of overlap with other people who are doing stuff in the theory scene, versus the kind of genuinely exoteric discourse that we aim to develop ourselves in order to be able to do via the agora.
But we can't yet.
Right.
And neither can you.
It's impossible. You can't. You want to go talk to everybody? Where? How? If you had 30 seconds to 15 minutes to say whatever's on your heart, mind, soul, and say it to everybody in the world, and then they would be able to revisit it for all time, and you were going to die right after you finish saying it. Like, so this is your real shot to say your piece. What would you say? Right? Well, first of all, there is nowhere in the world where you could go say something that could potentially be, I guess potentially on the internet, potentially anything could be seen by everybody, but also we know that's not going to happen. We know that's not going to be the case. You say it on cable television, even if it gets onto the internet, it's only going to be seen by certain people who are consuming certain kinds of content. And so when we're talking about making a message for the public, well, it's a lot more complicated now than it was in the age of television, radio, newspaper. Like when Churchill was on tour in England, as World War II was ramping up, and he's making all these famous speeches. He was really able to kind of assume a public in a way people can't nowadays, right?
Yeah. So we being, the modern citizen, has been led to believe that it is imperative to use your voice. That part of being a good person, part of being a responsible, caring citizen is speaking up and speaking out. And see something, say something, silence is violence, like all this stuff. And it's not, it doesn't belong to one side of the political spectrum or the other. Like, it is the case that people everybody just offers up their voice because they think they're using their voice. They think they're effectively stating something and effectively standing for something. But it's not true. The way people engage with the medium today is in this passive, like fully consumer mindset. Whereas back in the day, when the president got on TV or got on the radio, or when a political candidate went on tour and kind of did all his stump speeches and shit, like people paid attention. Now everything is flattened out to this kind of meaningless, unintelligible din of noise where you legitimately, like you're watching a video and it's about dead Palestinian babies. And then you scroll up and it's a chick and her tits are shaking out of her bikini. And then you scroll up and it's a cute cat. And then you scroll up and it's something else. And then you scroll up and it's AOC's feet. And you keep scrolling and it's like it's all this stuff. And yes, there are people who are trying to stand for something and trying to use their voice and trying to impact the world around them. But we don't engage with it in that way. We engage with it in the same way of this flattened out thing where dead Palestinian babies are exactly the same as bikini titties, which is exactly the same as cute cat videos. And it's all the same thing. And it's just this meaningless, passive interaction. So even if what we say goes out and it's there for posterity's sake, and it might be seen and heard by everybody, it still won't actually be engaged with it in this meaningful way that we demand. Like I fucking hate when I'm in a place with people and I'm speaking and people start speaking. I fucking hate it. Mm-hmm. And that is what happens on the internet. Like that is how people treat. Fuck, I do it too. I'm listening to a podcast while I'm working or while I'm doing chores or while I'm doing other things. Like we split our attention, and maybe it's out of necessity. And sometimes it definitely is out of necessity, but also we've been habituated into splitting our attention because now you're missing out on something. You're missing out on something. Now this, and on to the next, the churn. And it gets us into this fucking passive, fucking split attention having deer in the headlights while everything is rushing toward us and we're helpless. And I'm not willing.
Okay, no, say your thing. Yeah, finish.
Just like I'm not willing. I'm not willing to have a project that people treat that way. I'm not willing to say words that people don't stop what they're doing to listen to. So there's so much work that has to be done before you can speak to the public in creating the public itself, which is why we have to do all this Bildungsmech, like all of this fucking Rube Goldberg machine of everything. Mm-hmm. It's not just designing an argument and kind of developing us and our arguments and stuff. It's also developing the quote unquote public as well. And that's a point that people need to understand and reckon with.
Yeah. Well, I guess Bildungsmech came up on the last episode on this stream. It also came up here. And folks, that's the name of a book that I'm in the process of writing. Bildungsmech means mechanisms for cultivating human potential at population scale. Like that's what we're talking about. And the Bildung mechanisms that we've been developing through our institution and medium experiments with TU is kind of what we're getting at. Now, a lot of that stuff's not public. Some of it will be very soon. One example would be the turn. We had Sean up for the turn. The existence of the turn and the supervisions people can do in preparation to potentially get on the turn is an example of a Bildungsmech. The contradiction as a concept as opposed to the debate. right? We've developed the concept of the contradiction. We did one between Todd McGowan and Chris Catrone. By the way, McGowan apologized to me last week for the second time for how badly he did. I don't think he did bad at all.
No.
But he's become privy to the fact that we all make jokes about how that was like the nicest conversation with apparently no contradictions at all between two people who have very different approaches, and therefore there are serious contradictions. And we were trying to stage a conversation about contradictions, but instead Catrone and McGowan were just like nice guys to each other,
Just swell guys. Yeah. It was great though. It was a great conversation. And I think it did lay groundwork for the coming contradiction. I think it did.
100%. But I think McGowan realizing we were all like, yep, well, because I said publicly, next time you don't get to talk to Catrone, I'm going to have Mikey stand in place of you and talk to Catrone and speak on your behalf. And then that's why he's like, no, I'll do it. I'll do a better job next time. I promise, so it's funny. But the contradiction itself as something we're trying to develop here. And I think the best one was probably the one between Samuel Longcar and Justin Murphy. Like that was fascinating.
Yeah.
That was totally fascinating. And so much stuff to think about there. Well, the contradiction as opposed to the debate. Well, thinking in terms of disagreement, where our default for thinking about disagreements are debates, leaves us with nothing. And so the development of the concept of the contradiction, where no side wins except for the unconvinced worker with earbuds who's just trying to understand the contradictions between the two sides. That's our definition for what makes it a contradiction as opposed to a debate. Well, that's Bildungsmech too. Tribunal Zero, which Mikey's recent post on Substack was all about, is an example of a pretty radical thought experiment to develop a kind of Bildungsmech. The turn is probably the most institutionally embedded in terms of like how we're thinking about the structure at TU, but the Agora and the Coliseum, those are the next big ones. Now, I haven't done anything special on the Coliseum yet, but subscribers are privy to the A side that we just did on the Agora. People who write a piece based on the black box versus the Agora, because that's the full title of yesterday's talk. People who write a piece about the black box versus the Agora, they will get to undergo a supervision with Nance and I, where we can then sort of work with them. And then, on the other side of being accepted to like this inner circle level, then you get to access our super esoteric 6 hours. Momento. Yeah, we call it uno momento. The next one we do will be called dos momento. And we'll just keep going with the Spanish. Yeah.
And the memento, it was a portmanteau. Because we were having a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were having a moment, but it was also an internal memo because we also writing, like you Duridians out there, you guys might be fans of the fact that the primacy of speech, right? And how like speech is also writing. And in fact, speech is a more serious form of writing in a way, not necessarily, but speech can be seen as a more primordial form of writing. And we're RK pilled.
An essential moment in the sequence of writing, speaking, reading. Well, writing, speaking, thinking. Sorry. Writing, speaking, reading, writing, speaking. Like those are the three moments in a process called thinking.
Yes.
And if you've only really been doing one of those things, then your thinking itself is radically stultified for world conditions wherein reading matters. So
this is tangential, but the question did come up yesterday in the seminar, your seminar. Why should I try to get better at talking to people, just in general? And that's why, because talking to people is not just talking to people. If you fetishize it, or if you do it in this passive consumerist way, sure, it's just talking to people. But if you're serious about thinking, then speaking with others is a necessary component of thought itself, as is writing. So you don't have to go up here and think you're going to be the next Walt Whitman or fucking James Joyce. Like you could hate writing, but it is also a necessary part of thinking itself, because the language of thought, or the medium of thought, excuse me, is language itself. So you need to have a better command of language if you want to have a better command of your own thoughts and your own subjectivity and your own projection and your own life course. And if you want to maybe determine your own most. But so that's a tangent. I was explaining why the memento, because our internal memos aren't necessarily written things. Sometimes our internal memos or even our public writing, our public documents can be videos, can be live streams, can be public addresses and speeches, because we see speech and writing as the same species of activity, because it's thought is what we're doing. We're not doing a fetishized writing or a fetishized speaking. We're doing shit. We're trying to do genuine thinking. So the reason that it's called the memento is because it was a silly portmanteau of moment and memo. So if you want to check out the mementos, check out, click like, where?
Mandy, that's bullshit. She said, yeah, the workers with earbuds don't have the privilege of taking notes or writing ideas during the videos, sadly. That was me yesterday, and now I can't remember what the great ideas were. Bah. Yeah, except haven't you heard us say it like a fucking 1,000 times? Repetition is the cost of learning. Repetition. How many things have you actually rewatched? I don't care if you watch something one time. Watching it one time, the only kind of note that you can do, I fucking hate when people think that they've taken notes for something, now they've got it. It's like, no, the only notes you should be doing are like should I come back to this, and for what? Why? Why would I come back to this? Like, if you're multitasking, then you're never going to get it in like this sort of, so of course, and Mandy, you're 100% correct. You can never get it if you're multitasking. But that's why repetition. That's why repetition.
Exactly. And that's why, like that's why these things are, so much is made available. So much of this shit is made available to the workers with earbuds, because that's it. Like, yes, we know the struggle. Like that is why this shit is out there for you people who can't stop everything you're doing right now and give us your full rapt attention. We know that. And rather than getting upset and saying, fuck you, pay attention to me, we're saying, hey, guess what? You can come back to this. As a matter of fact, not you can come back to this. You have to come back to this if you want to understand what's happening. We make a point of saying that.
Like how much do I remember from when we read the Discourse on Method together? Like 2 lines that I think about all the time. Outside of those 2 lines, like what else? Because I mean, the fact that he kind of quilts the whole thing in an argument about artificial intelligence and whether we would know if someone's a robot or not, and he wrote that in like the 1400s or what? I mean, it's insane. It's fucking insane. It's like, what? It's like, wait, how did nobody tell me about this? How did? Why do we? Why do we call it the Turing test when Descartes invented it? Like what, dude? So you know, it's like a special moment.
Descartes based actually.
Yeah.
Like that, yeah.
That and the infinity of devices line. Like, outside of that, though, it's like, well, what else is he doing there? And you kind of have a sense for what he does there, but it doesn't count until you revisit it. And so that's why, if you look at the screen, and if you were watching a little while ago, you might have seen this, but basically, I had pulled up this right here. I can't stress this enough. Everything we're doing is presupposing that you get this. And if you don't get this, then what are you doing here? All of you people, you have some sense that you're here for a reason and that there must be something about some kind of a rhyme to our reason or like approach. Well, it's because of this. The point is that we've developed this with a certain kind of mentality that says, oh, we're not doing anything to break out of just being in a scene and develop ourselves into a serious milieu. without repetition built into it. You think that Thoreau and Emerson only read each other's letters one time?
Once?
You think Engels penned out like a response to Marx after reading it for the first time? No, people used to read each other's letters like 7 to 15 times before they would respond. And then it would take 7 months for their letter to reach its destination. And so outside of that, it's like we have to combat, which is to say harness and counter the tendencies inherent to the media. And those tendencies are TMI mixed with FOMO. TMI, FOMO, presentism, accelerationism. These are just the actual and of course narcissism. And these are the tendencies of the media. They are the implicit message and framing of everything we do on here. And so how do we counter that? Well, it's changing how you think first about the content itself. So you have never seen anything that we do unless you've rewatched it. The number of things that we've done is probably pretty long. The number of things that you've seen that we've done, it might be very long. But I don't consider anything that we've done something that you've actually seen until you've rewatched it. So if it's only one thing that you rewatch out of the year, congratulations, you saw one thing out of the year. Based. I'm glad that...
No, but I'd rather have the one who's seen one thing and truly seen one thing than no one understanding what we mean. When, I mean, last year on tour, on the US tour, I made a joke and I was like, yeah, I never read a book before Theory Underground, and it didn't land. People didn't know what I was trying to say, but what I was trying to say is, and I've made the joke a few successive occasions and it worked because we framed it in it, but I had never read a book before really internalizing this method of repetition.
It's mostly it's the Brian standard. It's the Burt standard we're talking about. The Burt standard is do an initial reading to get the text to get the lay of the land. Then you got to reread to test your knowledge by seeing if you can rephrase the text in your own terms. Then only after a third time, compare and contrast to everything you know. It's like when we hold ourselves to this kind of standard, no, we've not read any books, or we've read very few.
Very few.
Right. And part of this is my reaction to just like all these theory influencers who are always like, here's the 10 books I read, that I recommend that I read from 2025 or 2024 or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like they give you like a short little, like what it's about, like what's the book about? And it's just like, and I'm like, okay, show me the list of books you reread, please. The ones you read, the ones that were so rewarding, they were worth going over a second or third time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that list is short. And like changing your mindset, changing your attitude, your attunement, your disposition, you have to do that. We can't do that for you. So we're doing this. I don't know. It's like prehistory. Like we are in this, like we're in prehistory still because, or maybe once again, maybe not still, but like we have to get people on the same page, and getting on the same page doesn't mean, oh, I watch everything you do, because we do a lot and we don't want to overstimulate you and overwhelm you. So if there is only one thing that you've been able to go back to time and time again, and look, I'm not saying time and time again, but if it took two or three or four times for something to really click, then that's way more valuable than having people who do watch everything 100%. All the time, because these things persist.
I hope people don't rewatch too much of the stream content, because a lot of the stream content is just a way of popularizing and kind of funneling you towards the real lecture and seminars. Yeah, but Mandy had a great point, and it's just like what she's saying is that like when she can comment and she's in it live, her attention is better. Like so I think different people are better able to focus depending on whether they're watching it live or not. Yeah. And I guess a part of it is weird because it's weird. It's like there's almost some sort of weird disassociative thing that everybody's falling into this habit of, because it's like, in order to focus on what you guys are saying, I have to have a separate conversation over here in this live chat. And it's like,
yeah.
So you focus better while you're talking about something else. But it's true. It's just literally true. It's like
It is true.
In some cases, I can focus on something. So, and I did want to say something about this because I've been having this realization about, because ADHD, if you feel that you have that, or that describes something about your engagement with the world today, because of especially the devices that we use. ADHD, it's something that I've thought a lot about, had to navigate. And I mean, I have like I started getting in the practice of like writing down like how many things I do in 10 minutes. And it's actually ridiculous. And they say you can't be effective and multitask. But also, when I say that they say that, who do we mean? We mean sociologists. And who are they basing that off of? Averages. And am I average? No. And has your average person built Theory Underground? No. Did your average person write timenergy while working at Amazon? No. So
no, dude.
So when they say that people can't multitask, it's like, well, no, bosses paid sociologists to try to figure out how productive their PMC shills are. And they were like, they're not as productive when they're multitasking. So then they make these sort of normative statements about human beings. But I embrace
and
multitasking.
They're based on socially average, the lowest common denominator. Are you the lowest common denominator, dear reader? I hope not.
Are you? And so, for me, there's a kind of productive procrastination, multitasking. And then there's a kind of multitasking that is it's arguably not effective, but it is enjoyable. I've been thinking a lot about how enjoyable it is. Like listening to music while listening to an interview, or listening to an audiobook while listening to music, while having lower down voices from other streams going, which is something Nance and I have been messing with over the last couple weeks. And it feels like a brain massage.
I legit, the folder on my hard drive is called oral sex, not oral, O-R-A-L, but A-U-R-A-L, oral sex, because
nice.
No, it is very, it's pleasurable. It's enjoyable, and not in this like fucking Jewish sense. Oh, it's a self-overcoming. Like I'm getting off on the fact that I'm not understanding it. Like it is like listening to music, but it's like we're problematizing music itself. Like we're listening to sounds, and like having 2 or even 3 different lectures going while you have music and there's Discord, but the way shit plays with itself and the other constituent parts of it, things do emerge, and things do actually make themselves known in the cacophony. It's very interesting.
I think that like there's some kind of weird musical or poetic impulse that we have that we're still experimenting with. It's very early phase. I'm not saying it's like great or anything, or that everyone else should go try it. But if you check out Fair Use the band on YouTube, it's our little band page, and we've got some songs up. And these songs are always an experiment with dissonance in the cacophony, and then teasing out harmonies and melodies and semantic threads, and kind of weaving all of it. And so there's something special for us in that. I don't know when it will become special to other people. It could be years, but for now it's just like but like I said, it feels like an actual brain massage to listen to it. And when we played your song, was it seriously, this is not a joke? I'm serious. This is not a joke. Was it that song?
No, It's Our Turn.
Okay,
The
I
one
played
from yesterday.
I played that, and there were several people in the call who were clearly enjoying it, and so
Rebecca,
that's good news.
Rebecca seemed to get it, and that made me happy because I know
Alex
Rebecca. I
Sappington
have,
too.
yeah, it's like specifically Rebecca. Like I know Rebecca. We met, so like I am invested in the fact. Like I do appreciate her opinion, and the fact that like she wasn't like, this is total trash. The fact that she was like, oh, this is, I see there's something here. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say she loved it, but the fact that I was like, oh, that's actually cool. That's actually really fucking cool.
So I'm multitasking. The last thing that we'll touch on is the podcasters that matter, and I'll argue with everybody if I have to about Joe Rogan. But
we need a leftist Joe Rogan, don't we?
Oh my god, dude. Look, who was saying that recently? Who said that very recently?
Everybody.
No,
Hassan,
Adam
Vosh,
but Adam
Curtis, or Adam Conover.
No, Adam Friedland, the Cumtown guy.
Oh, the Adam Friedland show.
Yeah, he said
he said
at the beginning of the one where he brought Destiny on that people have been saying there needs to be a left Joe Rogan. And so the obvious question is it going to be him or is it going to be Destiny? And then he says, and then as you can clearly see from this conversation, it's me. And then they go to the conversation. Dude, he's funny. He's way funnier than Joe Rogan. That's for sure.
He's funny. And I get some enjoyment there.
I mean, I've seen him do two things, so I can't say that I know. Judging off of two things that I've seen him do, I think he's a funny guy. Yeah.
Yeah. No, he's very funny, very sharp,
like
very
it would
witty.
be, it would be about as close to like if we're thinking about Theo Vaughn and Joe Rogan and Lex Friedman as basically being the three most important podcasts you could go on if you wanted your book idea to get out there.
Yep.
I would say that if Adam Friedland keeps doing what he's doing, and he were to be as big as those ones, then basically what he's doing is the closest you would come to, when we're thinking of this book circuit, a stop on that circuit being something more like Between Two Ferns or Eric Andre. That's kind of what he's doing. Is like he kind of, or even better, the who's the guy who goes amazing?
Jesse Lee Peterson.
Yeah. Adam Friedland's like the Jesse Lee Peterson for leftists, you know.
Yeah, but that has a limited reach necessarily.
Yeah. Well, of course, it's
the fact that
it's like a sort of millennial thing, I think.
Yeah, but the fact that people think, oh, there needs to be an explicitly left Joe Rogan, like, no, Joe Rogan
is the left.
Yeah. In many ways, like
it's like, bitch, you guys fucking had your Joe Rogan. It was literally him. And then you all decided to fucking cancel him and talk shit every time he has a person on who is popular and important in the attention economy, and he wanted to get to know that person. It's like, no, the American left doesn't get to have nice things because it doesn't deserve nice things. That's what that means.
They tear themselves to pieces. It's a suicidal position.
Dude, do you remember when he was getting canceled for the N-word like 2 years ago? And basically people went and they clipped together all these instances of him saying the N-word. And in every one of those fucking instances, he was saying someone else had said it. So he's like, and then that guy calls this other guy. And so it's never like he's out here calling people. No, it's always, it's like, oh yeah, look, Nance said that George Bush is a fag or something like that. It's like, It's like, I'm saying someone else said it, but then all of a sudden everybody's like, but Joe Rogan, but you literally said it. And it's like, yeah, but it's the difference between using it and using it with malice and using it to be like, look, this person with malice used it. And then dude, I'm over here using, I'm now because I'm in this weird position where it's like, yeah, I'm referring to people using the N-word instead of just saying it. And it's like, it's stupid. It's stupid.
So infantile.
And then every little identity group in America that wants to act like it's persecuted is trying to come up with a new word that they can raise to that status so that they can go around and fucking try to be like, oh, you shouldn't say Karen. You shouldn't say fag. You shouldn't. It's just fucking stupid, dude. It's like every little group wants to have their little words that get added to the little roster of the words that we have to go around and police. Oh, and you can't even say someone else said it now.
Yeah, it's fucking insane. It's infantile. Cool. It's absurd. Yeah. We're lowering ourselves down to a fucking disgusting standard. It is like Fahrenheit 451. It is like fucking George Orwell 1984, but it really actually is. It's fucking stupid. These are words. Come the fuck on. Now, that said, don't be a fucking asshole. Don't be a fucking dick. Like, what happened to that?
And
what happened
don't ever try to out edge us. That's the main thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Jesus, dude, I got scolded for saying don't drink the Kool-Aid.
Who?
Remember that? You were there. You were there.
Wait.
I said something about, no, it was before tour. I said something about like, oh yeah, those people were drinking the Kool-Aid or something. And then I got scolded about how that's actually problematic. You can't use that as a fucking, like, come on, dude. Like, I'm not an asshole.
I think
I'm not a fucking asshole.
That was the same fucking person who tried to tell us that we should say houseless instead of homeless. Yeah. Yep. And then recently somebody gave somebody shit for saying grandfathered. I think Benjamin Studebaker was saying somebody said he shouldn't say grandfathered in anymore because that's offensive. And it's like,
yeah, dude. Like, and look, I understand where it comes from. When there's
shut up.
There's no you don't have access to power in the world. You don't have access to anything real, anything meaningful, anything concrete. So what do? You go to the commodity form and you go to language games. I understand where it comes from. I don't blame people. I'm not sitting here and saying it's the end of the world, blah blah, free speech. I'm not doing the dumb retarded bullshit they do on the Dave Rubin show. What I'm saying is it's meaningless, pointless, surface level, masturbatory bullshit. It's like, stop. Go focus on something that matters. If you genuinely care, focus on something that matters. Language games don't fucking matter.
Though, with that said, I do think that people who belong to the priest class or people who are doing something that used to be done by the priest class, whether you're doing that as a new media influencer or as some kind of a bureaucrat in some new institution that's still kind of aping something the priest class used to do. So let's just keep it very vague. And I'll just say, if you are in such a position, becoming psychoanalytically, critically, theoretically, like, aware of certain things is good. It just means stop telling regular working people that in order to be good, they have to change how they talk. So for instance, like, notice how so many of the words we use for this sucks are words that come out of like something very specific to someone's struggle. You know, what does that tell us? Well, okay, that's an interesting thing. That's an interesting thing for people who like to be very aware of things. Does that mean that now you're on a mission to go tell other people to stop using these words? Okay, there's the awareness does not have to follow with a certain kind of advocacy that is police-like, right? Like this
admonishment and scolding, the woke scolds.
Yeah.
Look, dude, I love language. I love language. I want to be a linguist. I wanted to go to fucking university and study language. So when I say language games don't matter, It's not that I'm saying it's not cool, it's not interesting, and it can't tell us something about the world and ourselves. It can, and it does, and it is extremely interesting. And I love language, and I love etymology, and I love all these things. But I'm also aware of the fact that this is not concrete action in the world, and the people who scold others and the people who admonish normal people for lacking awareness, because 99% of the time it's just a lack of awareness. It's not malice. It's not hateful. It's just something that they fucking do because their material conditions leave them with this fucking field of possibilities, and that's how they are, and that's who they are, and it's their fucking habitus, and they're not malicious people. They're just working people doing their best. But
and awareness,
it's crazy.
This awareness, I guess everything you just said was sort of like packaged in this bread tube packaging that I have to unwrap real quick, because I get what you're saying, but also there's a way of packaging it that I just want to break, which is, okay, in the last 10 years, it's been very popular on the left. Now you do see some of this on the new right, the people on Substack who are all like trying to figure out what alignment the cultural right should take. They do a little bit of this as well. But on the left, it's very popular to see people say, no, we shouldn't scold. We shouldn't admonish. We need to remember that people aren't educated. We need to be sympathetic and call them in. And this language is framed in such a way that says, we know, and they don't know, but don't worry. If we bring them in the right way, we can change them. If we just act a little loving towards them, they'll stop saying retard. Well, maybe you just need to worry. Maybe you just need to worry about something else. Maybe that's actually not the productive thing to focus on, not because it's frivolous bullshit, which it is, but also because people fucking hate you and they know that your little agenda or axe to grind in the moment, which is a moving goalpost thing that you're doing, doesn't amount to anything. And now they know that they couldn't bring you home to their friends, to their workplace, around anybody that they speak to, because, what else might you fucking want to try to nip in the bud? Because you're one of those call someone in on
crazy motherfuckers who just can't bite your fucking tongue. Keep your shit to yourself. Keep you problems. Don't make you problems everyone else problems. And it's totally valid to have you problems. We all have you problems. But you have to realize that when you come up against things in the world, often it is a you problem. So keep that shit to yourself. Keep it fucking moving. Don't blow up the spot. Find a community of fucking others with whom you fucking relate, with whom you share some recognition, and work on it to figure your shit out. Pull yourself up by your fucking bootstraps. Once again, if you don't have boots, we're giving out free boots on Sundays. Like all these things. It is this kind of unitary worldview. It's the teleological perversion where, yes, we don't assume that, once we onboard these people, they will stop saying retard. No, I want a world where people are free to say retard. I want a world where people are free to say whatever they want. I don't give a fuck what you say.
Yeah. In fact, I want to live in a world where I don't have to care about what you say, but everybody will be right back right after this. You can support the free and public work at TU by becoming a patron over at Patreon.
But if you would like to get involved,
hold on, that was the wrong PSA, everybody. That would have been a much longer PSA. No, we'll be right back right after this.
Ha ha ha. Yeah, that was funny. And/or that was a good point, Dave. I probably fully agree with you. Man, this is great. Aren't we having a great day? This is going really well. But hold on, man. Something just came up. I got something I got to go do. I'll be right back, man. Don't go anywhere. Just give me a minute. Hello, audience. I'm here to talk to you. How are you? I hope you're well. I'm glad you're here. I wanted to first and foremost recognize you and let you know that you do a great job in general as an audience. I'm convinced that the Theory Underground audience is the best audience on the internet. And thank you for that. You know, over the last several months, we've really worked together to build a finely tuned audience machine. You guys do a good job. You're deliberate. You're intentional. You stay on track. You follow the thread. You ask good questions, clarifying questions. You keep the bullshit to a minimum. It's good. You guys are great in the live chat and in the comment sections. Thank you. I wanted to let you know there's another way that you could be helpful as an audience member, and that's by remembering to hit the like, share, subscribe buttons. That's by leaving a cool comment. That's by maybe giving a review on the podcast app or whatever, and doing all the algorithm things. Because there was a point in time when you, audience member, were not a member of the audience here because you didn't know about Theory Underground. You were just out there doing your thing, living your best life probably. And then you were like, oh, what's going on over here? This looks interesting. And now you're here. And now you do a good job. But think about the next guy. There's a guy out there, or someone out there right now, who really kind of, in a sense, really belongs in the audience at Theory Underground because they're going to get an awful lot out of it, but they're also going to bring an awful lot to the ongoing conversations. And the only way they're going to know is if you, dear audience, continues to do the algorithm things. So the algorithm keeps recommending Theory Underground to new people. So do us a favor, do yourself a favor, and do the next guy a favor. Pay it forward, and that'll be awesome. That's all. That's all. You know, just wanted to pop in, say thanks. You're doing a great job. We appreciate it. Give yourselves a pat on the back. And with that, we'll return to our regularly scheduled broadcast. Peace out, guys. Actually, there's a good chance I'm on the video. So when this commercial break is over, I'll be there either way. Peace.
We're back. At least I am.
We're back.
Yo, what's up, everybody? Nance, keep it going for a second while I do this phone call.
Word. What's cracking, everyone? Glad you're back. Glad I'm back. Oh, what's happening? Oh, okay. I see. So we started off and we kind of listed a number of things that we were going to get into. We talked about the esoteric versus the exoteric. We talked about the kind of trifecta of male podcasters and why they matter, why you should take them seriously. And we want to dwell on that really, a little bit more.
Yeah, we didn't really get into that at all. Yeah, we're gonna get more into that before we close out. Yeah. Being Joe Rogan, Lex Friedman, and Theo Von. And I think largely Theo Von, people probably give him a pass. Now, I have actually seen... Yeah, because he's fucking hilarious. And he's a very, very good comedian. I don't think Joe Rogan is a good comedian. I think he's very good at podcasting. I don't think he's a good comedian. Theo Von... he's good at being personable. That's what he's good at.
Yes. He's good at just having a conversation, shooting the shit. And he kind of created like an entire genre of like being in the world, being with the other. Like before Joe Rogan's podcast really blew up. And look, I'm not saying it wouldn't have happened were it not for him, but I do think it's true that like he was the one. Like he carried the entire podcasting world on his back. Someone else would have done it were it not for him. But like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I remember when podcasts started and people were like, well, what does that word even mean? Like, oh, it's because it's on an iPod, but it comes from like broadcast, like radio broadcasts. And I was like, well, do you have to download it? I don't have an iPod. How do you access it? It's on the internet? Is it on the radio? Like, it was like just this new weird thing.
Oh, you weren't predicting it would be a big deal?
There's one guy, dude.
Anyway, we're not.
But the world we live in now,
yeah,
podcasting is such a huge part of the world we live in now, and Joe Rogan is the guy when it comes to podcasting. And people want to.
It can't be done again, guys. It's a specific historical moment between the disintegration or breaking of the dam that these legacy media monopolies had, and he was just enough in enough very important worlds to do something, you know? So it's like the mixture of Fear Factor, sort of MTV appearances, Wrestling Mania, fucking UFC, like there's just like enough, and then comedy. And it's like, it's a nice balance of different forces when combined with a person who just likes to get to know people and isn't a partisan ideologue who just like wants to sit there and berate people from a certain tendency while making people of another tendency always look good.
Dude, I saw a clip of a podcast. I saw a clip of a podcast just the other day of someone interviewing Chris Hanna of Propagandhi. Propagandhi's famous punk band. They're one of my favorite bands.
Yeah.
But they're also very woke. And guess what? It's okay to be woke if you're cool about it. But the interviewer was like scolding Chris Hanna for not being woke enough, and it was so weird because I was like, dude, like Chris Hanna, like their first album was like, it was like pro-gay, pro-vegan, anti-fascist. Like they are the woke meme. Like Propagandhi is like uber woke, and for a podcaster to bring him on for an interview to like scold him blew my fucking mind, dude.
That's so funny.
And people think that can coexist. People think we can have that as a representation of the left and a leftist Joe Rogan. No, you can't. Joe Rogan doesn't bring people on and belittle them and demean them and admonish them and scold them. He brings them on and says, whoa, that's interesting. Why don't you tell me about that?
Yeah, and he'll challenge somebody. He'll challenge someone on something and push it hard, but it's only when it's like in his wheelhouse and he knows a lot about it and he's invested in it. So climate change and pot would be two examples. He's also said, that's the thing, is like people will sit there and if they don't like borders, for instance, they'll sit there and pick all the times where he said, obviously you need borders, but what they'll miss is like the times when he's like taking a pretty fierce stand on people who are just straight up anti-immigrant. Like he's gone out on a limb in those cases. But also, I don't give a shit. That's not the point. The point is about his reach. That's the point. Yeah. The point is about how it's not his heart, soul, and mind that are what's at stake. It's about a reach, about how his personal brand and legitimacy comes from something that the overwhelming majority of people in this country actually can vibe with or resonate with or actually appreciate as existing. And finally, on this note about reach, I want to take it back to this point from the previous episode with Benjamin. Someone had said something along the lines of Joe Rogan was responsible for Lithium 19 said Rogan low-key helped Trump win. Now, that's much lighter than what I was saying, which was responsible. But like, helped Trump? Well, you know, if his reach helped, sure. Except that you know that Trump didn't get more voters this time around.
In fact, he got less.
Yeah. So I think that there's like this mainstream Democrat narrative where they just want to act like it's like fucking guys who just hate women and black people turned up out of the woodwork and were supporting Trump. And it's like, no one turned up out of the woodwork. What happened was you all picked the least likable human being on the planet unless you come from a completely secured blue district, which was Kamala. And then you gaslit everybody and said, well, you have to support her. And then she was like never even a runner-up in any previous primary. After having gaslit everybody on how fucking apparently okay Biden was, when everybody knew there was a problem there as well. And then not only was there no apology, no like, okay, yeah, we picked a bad one. Oh yeah, we should have actually had some people in the primaries. And oh yeah, let's actually do something to at least pretend we care about Democratic opinion. Nope. it's once again, it's her turn. Except that whereas with Hillary, like at least she had like this experience that supposedly makes her more of like, oh, it's her turn. Like, of course, there's something extremely anti-populist and elitist about just telling people, yep, well, it's her turn now, get on board. It's just the way it's going to be. Instead, all of a sudden, it's like, she doesn't even have the kind of experience that would be required to do this job, but it's her turn anyway. And it was the same fucking thing, but worse. And we were all like, are you kidding me? And then, of course, fewer people than ever show up for this election. And then instead of being like, wow, fewer people voted for us than they voted last time. No, it's more, it's all Trump. And then they try to blame Rogan for it. But with that said, who was invited to go on the Joe Rogan Experience and refused to go on? Oh, it was Kamala. So when we say Rogan low-key helped Trump win, you know what really helped Trump win was Kamala trying to act like a diva and not going on and saying he would have to travel to her and it could only be 1 hour long.
Does he ever do that, bitch? Come on. Like meet people where they're at. It is insane that after the fact, like, yeah, the narrative that, oh, it's rampant misogyny and rampant racism and rampant fascism. And it's like, well, I didn't vote for Kamala. So does that mean I'm a racist, misogynistic fascist?
Yes, you are. You are. You're the worst.
It's insane, dude. And I don't know, man. Like Kamala lost. The Democrats lost. Yes, Trump turned out to be the winner of the election, but it's because the Democrats fucking lost. There was so much they could have done. It was like, just like with Bernie. If they wanted to win, they wouldn't have fucked Bernie over. Like, they don't want to win. Stop defending Kamala Harris. Stop defending the Democratic fucking party. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't want to win. Stop coming and saying Joe Rogan and all the fucking fascists who listen to Joe Rogan. Like, that's insane. That's fucking insane.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. But you know what? I mean, do what thou wilt. Obviously, we're preaching to the choir, folks. Everyone here in our chat, you all already know, except for maybe a random person here or there. But let's just to really drive home the reach point, I want to read off something that I wrote. I'm going to share it right here. Let's change scenes up around. So there you go. Check this out, everybody. So this is a Substack post. Oh, wait. Wrong one. Let me bring it over here. Go like that. There we go. So this person had said in response to, I said, Vosh is blaming men for hating women, but Kamala didn't go on Joe Rogan. That was a choice. And then this person said she did go on Call Her Daddy, which is basically girl Joe Rogan. And so then my response, it sounds much better in Nance's voice, so I'll let you read it, man. But yeah, let's
hold on before I read it. What is Call Her Daddy?
Oh,
do you know what that is?
Yeah. I do. So it's I'll pull it up here. I've listened to at least something by it. So this is a woman named Alex Cooper. She has a podcast. It has a not insignificant number of followers. Kamala did go on there, as you see in this photo. Look at that. Post Malone went on there. Well, you know what? Post Malone went and did shrooms with Joe Rogan on the air. So that was like one of the coolest things that happened in 2023, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, you know, she is kind of marketing herself as like this, like the woman's
girl Rogan
version. Yeah, Call Her Daddy. It's the girl Rogan,
dude,
but it doesn't work for a reason we'll get into.
It doesn't work. I don't keep up with pop culture. Like just yesterday, Kier and Jacob made a joke about Drake, and I was like, well, I don't get that joke. And then Sean laughed at me for not getting that joke. Like, I don't pay attention to pop culture, but I fucking know who Joe Rogan is. Right. Like, you can't sit here and say Call Her Daddy is girl Rogan if people like me. If people like me, and I'm not, and I do spend a lot of time on the internet. It's not to say that I'm out of touch. I just don't keep up with it. I am aware of what's going on. I'm just partially unplugged. But people who are all the way unplugged do know who Joe Rogan is. So to sit there and say this bitch is the girl Rogan, no, dude, she's not. I'm sorry, dude. Anyway, and by the way, Arturo, I'm not trying to be mean to you. If you see this,
Yeah.
sorry. Okay. This is a popular comparison, but it isn't great. JRE has 190 million monthly downloads. Compare that to Call Her Daddy, which only has 25 million monthly downloads. Considering the fact that 19% of the Joe Rogan Experience's audience is female, that means that Rogan has more female listeners than Call Her Daddy. 19% of 190 million is 36.1 million. 70% of Call Her Daddy's audience is female, which means that Rogan's female base is more than double Call Her Daddy's 17 million female listeners. When the comparison usually gets made, people say that Call Her Daddy is the second most popular podcast. This misses how big of a difference exists between the two. But beyond the numbers themselves, there's also the accumulated symbolic import from having been around much longer. JRE has existed 10 years longer than Call Her Daddy, since before podcasts were popular. That's a lot of time to show how open-minded yet skeptical its host is, how much diversity in personality and opinion he's able to entertain, and all of this amounts to a kind of symbolic capital that nobody else even comes close to, especially in the working class. People will say that his audience is mostly male, as if that's a strike against its importance. People who say such things prove they have no interest in winning votes or representing Americans, 50% of whom are male. As has been made painstakingly clear by the liberal reaction to Harris' loss, guys not showing up for Harris made a difference. But it was Harris who didn't show up for guys. That was my point.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
And that person said something like, I concede the point. I feel owned by facts and logic. And then I was like,
yeah.
Well, I'm not trying to own you, but I am trying, but I am getting, this is the most mathematical I've ever gotten on anybody on the internet. And it's because I was just like, because the person came out and said the quiet part out loud. It's like, guys, saying that there's a woman's Joe Rogan is like saying that there was a man's Oprah in the 90s. It's just, there's there's not a real comparison. It's a special thing. Let the special thing be its own thing.
Let the thing be its own fucking thing, because it is its own thing. Like, that'd be like trying to force Jerry Springer into the role of a female Oprah Winfrey, and he wasn't explicitly male and he wasn't wholesome, whereas Oprah was at least superficially wholesome.
Yeah.
Just like Joe Rogan is not explicitly necessarily male, it's this post hoc thing that men tend to listen to him, but a lot of women listen to him too. In fact, 31 million or whatever it was, or even more than that, 36 million listen to him. Yeah. We need to stop reifying these fucking categories. Like, we've been separated and segregated and instrumentalized and fucking operationalized. Like, we've been put into these categories and we've been taken advantage of by power. And when we do dumb bullshit like this, we just reify it. We're smarter than that.
What do you mean, Alvin? Alvin asks, guys, who's Lukács? No, Lucas.
Wukash?
Wukas. Sorry, Wukas.
Wukash.
Sorry, I'm not used to.
homie.
Okay. No, we know who Wukas is. It's not Lukács. Okay. Lukács is a theorist. Wukas is our boy. But, like, what are you saying about him?
Are you asking
to
who?
our work?
Are you asking?
He
like,
said,
who
guys,
is Wukash?
who's Wukas contributing to your work? What do you mean, who? Like, you mean how?
Yeah, do you mean what are his theorists? Or do you mean what?
Yeah, like,
or
what do you
how
mean?
Or who or where or when or why?
Because they could also
he's the
actually be
homie.
getting, because we've mentioned him, but they could be getting him mixed up with Lukács.
Lukács.
So, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, that's pretty much what we wanted to say about Lex, Theo, and Rogan. In a sort of sense, I think about how they are the only three important podcasts in a sort of sense. If I'm thinking about wanting to get a message out there, yeah, I would go and Call Her Daddy. But the point is that they're each doing something that nobody else is doing or is able to do at scale.
Yeah.
And then of course there's like millions of other podcasts, and like, you know, we could go on all kinds of podcasts all over the world. The issue is podcasts kind of exist for like little audiences, right? So it's like when we're thinking about like getting something out to the masses, if there's anything like masses still, which is still, well, not really a thing. Well, the closest you can come would be Rogan,
Joe Rogan's audience.
Lex, Vaughn.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is like the little circuit I think Trump did. I don't know if Trump went on Friedman, but he went on Rogan, and
he went on Friedman before Theo and Trump, or Theo and Rogan. He went on Lex first.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that's the mainstream, dude. Like it's crazy to me that people think
that is the new mainstream. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, if you want to kind of reject that and go live in a corner and be Robinson Crusoe, that's cool. But like, if you actually do want to take part in something that could be transformed into a public, that's it.
Yeah. And right now I'm not trying to go. I mean, that's not a goal of mine, is to go on there.
No. But
if I were to someday, I would have reasons, and I would also have, at that point, have spent a lot of time using Bill Dung Mech to develop myself into a different kind of person than I am right now. Like a person capable of speaking to the post-class fractured mass, which is not what we are trying to perform here for you all. That is not at all what we're doing here. That's something we'll only start really practicing once we get the Agora going. So, yeah.
But to the people out there who listen to NPR and go to your DSA meetings, and I don't know, listen to your hyper niche leftist podcasts, and you guys think that you can kind of take control of messaging and continue scolding people for words that they use, like, stop that. Or maybe continue doing that, but just admit defeat.
No, Elvin was picking up on something else we were talking about. We read In the Shadow of the Silent Majority with him. That's all. But all right, everybody, we gotta close this thing out. I gotta go to jiu-jitsu. Very excited.
Yeah.
To get back into the flow of things.
Fuck yeah, dude.
I've gone for like 2 weeks without it, and it's killing me. So yeah, everybody.
Fuck yeah. Peace out, everyone. We'll see you on the next one.
Catch you all on the flip side. And remember, this little PSA we were about to run, we received a complaint from somebody recently. They said it's long. Yeah, no fucking duh. Everything we do is. And we're not going to stop. Like what? Yeah.
We're just getting started, motherfucker.
The part where what we're doing like requires that we also eat and pay rent, or hopefully can someday buy a home or have health care, seems to be the part that a lot of people don't care about when they start making statements about, oh, you guys run a lot of ads. Yeah, that we made for ourselves. It's not like we have fucking Nike out here doing some bullshit. Come on. So enjoy it. Enjoy it. You're in the underground. And if you don't like it, well, do something about it. Peace. You can support the free and public work at TU by becoming a patron over at Patreon.
But if you would like to get involved and become a member at Theory Underground so that you can listen to special content that is not accessible to anyone else, or if you go up a subscriber level, actually join in the discussions, or at the top level, have us actually read your work, giving constructive feedback, and ultimately paving a way to potentially being a part of what we call the turn, then you'll want to become a subscriber. That's how you will access the ongoing courses and seminars. We've brought together Benjamin Studebaker's experience in political theory and science and philosophy with my critical social theory, phenomenology, existentialism, critique of political economy, critical media theory approach, combined with Michael Downes's fault line theory. You know, the CCRU versus Ljubljana School, or Žižek versus Land. And of course, how he brings those against one another and then transcends them through other thinkers like Baudrillard, who he'll be teaching an intro course to in 2025. All of us are teaching stuff in 2025 that rhymes or argues or goes together. And so the best way to accelerate your development getting into theory right now is to just become a subscriber at TU. Just go to the website, click get involved, and look, what I'm about to play for you all is a really special moment from our documentary that we're working on. An interview where Benjamin explains why he's supporting Theory Underground and getting involved as a active member here at the core of the teaching team.
Yeah, so the thing that I notice is that a lot of people criticize the university, they criticize the left, they don't build an alternative institution. They will go, the university sucks, but you know what's great? Substack and Patreon and YouTube, and they'll lean into that. But that is a negation, right? You guys don't do that. You guys are interested in sublating the university within the newly emergent media. Or you could frame it the other way, sublating the newly emergent media within the university, right? And so this, of course, will ultimately lead, if you take it where it goes, to a question of institutions and having actual economic, social role possibilities for theorists. This is the critical crisis, which is that there are still some very bright, very well-educated people, but they are not able to replace themselves. And because most of them have university positions, their level of interest in replacing themselves is to some degree compromised.
Yeah.
They don't have to worry that much about themselves. They don't have that much stake in it because they're already set up. However, because you are in the underground, you have some potential of being able to actually create an institution or structure which makes it possible for people to do theory in the future. This is something that, as far as I can tell, only you are doing. The thing about freeing Mikey from wage labor, this idea not only that your channel would free you from the Amazon job, but that this could grow in such a way that it could provide spaces for multiple people, and then those multiple people could interact in the way that they would in a monastery or in a university department. This is the revolutionary idea in terms of raising consciousness and making it possible for us to think in such a way that we could return even to the horizons of the tens and talking about things like Medicare for all in a not stupid, not bullshit way, in a serious way. To get to that point, we need to raise our level of ability to think. We need new intellectuals in our generation that are real intellectuals and not people who are running around scared of what the DSA or their university department thinks of them. You have the potential to actually make a real material intervention into not just knowledge production, but in Bildung, into the making of people. Yeah. This is something that we can do. There's a window right now where I am not in the university, and so I have a real reason to think very seriously about, can we do something else? Because I'm annoyed, myself with the whole process of trying to be in that. And I would like there to be something else, something better. I have all my critiques of it that come in part from being at Cambridge, in part from studying ancient thinkers. We could do something better than it. Not just something that is an imitation or steals some things from it and does the best you can with it, but something that actually is better and that produces the kind of theory that in modernity, how do you make a Hegel? How do you make a Marx? We have to reinvent this. It's no longer possible to do that. We've got to, I think, actually institutionalize in a material way, and this is the sense in which I will uphold the kernel of materialism, actually giving a shit about the structure and what kind of structure is necessary to give rise to a form of life in which this kind of really, really good work can be produced.